She slapped him. In a packed elevator. In front of 15 witnesses. In the most expensive corporate building in Manhattan. She slapped the most powerful man in the country across the face. And didn't even know it. 1 second of rage. 1 split second of bad judgment. And just like that, Lily Carter's entire life cracked open like a fault line running straight through the middle of everything she thought she understood about herself. The worst part? She didn't regret it. Not right away. The best part? Neither did he. Drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. And if you stay until the end, hit that like button. You'll understand why. Let's go. The elevator was already packed when Lily shoved herself through the closing doors. She knew she shouldn't have. She saw the gap closing, felt the collective exhale of irritation from the people already crammed inside, and she shoved herself through anyway. Messenger bag first, elbow second, apology nowhere. Sorry, she said, not sounding sorry at all. It was a Thursday. It was 6:47 in the evening, and Lily Carter had not sat down once since 8 o'clock that morning. She pressed herself into the back corner, one shoulder wedged against cold steel, the other pressed against someone's expensive suit jacket. The elevator hummed, the doors closed. 23 floors to go. She pulled out her phone. 3 missed calls from her mother's home nurse. A text from her landlord about the rent increase she'd known was coming for 2 months and still hadn't figured out how to handle. An email from her creative director that said simply, the Hartwell mock-ups. Tonight. Not tomorrow. Tonight. Lily stared at that email for a long moment. She had been working on the Hartwell account for 6 weeks straight. 6 weeks of 14-hour days, of eating lunch at her desk, of coming home after 10 o'clock and falling asleep with her laptop open on her chest. She had redesigned the entire brand identity from scratch. The logo, the color language, the packaging concepts, everything. And her creative director had spent the last week presenting those concepts to the client as though the ideas had materialized out of thin air. As though Marcus Webb had conjured them himself in his glass corner office with his $4,000 chair and his cold brew subscription. She had not been mentioned once, not in the presentation, not in the client email, not in the follow-up call where the client said the work was, and she had read the transcript 3 times because she couldn't believe it, exactly the kind of creative vision we were looking for. Her vision, her 16-hour Saturdays. Her eyes going blurry at 2 in the morning because she couldn't figure out why the secondary typeface felt wrong until she finally pulled it and rebuilt the whole system from scratch. Marcus had even used her color rationale verbatim. She knew because she'd written it in a shared doc, and apparently he'd just copied it, pasted it into his presentation notes, delivered it to the client like he'd had some kind of design epiphany in the shower. The Hartwell mock-ups. Tonight. Right. Because the first round wasn't enough. Now he needed more, and he needed them immediately. And the fact that Lily had been here since before the sun came up apparently didn't register as a reason to maybe give her until morning. She was in the middle of typing a response. Carefully worded, professionally restrained, nothing that would get her fired. When she heard it. A voice. Low, male, unhurried. Coming from just behind her right shoulder. It's tight, the voice said, but I'm not complaining. Lily's fingers stopped moving. Something about those words, the tone of them, the casual ease, the way they landed like a private joke, hit her directly in the nerve that had been raw and exposed all day. Maybe for longer than that. Maybe for the better part of a year, since the last time a man had thought it was appropriate to make comments she hadn't invited and couldn't escape. She didn't process it. She didn't slow down. She didn't ask herself what he was actually talking about, or give herself even a half second to be rational. She just turned around, and she slapped him, open palm, right cheek, not a tap, not a flinch, a real slap, the kind that made a sound you could hear over the mechanical drone of the elevator shaft. The elevator froze. Not literally. The elevator kept moving. But the people inside it, 12 of them, pressed together in $500 shoes and tailored everything, went completely, utterly, catastrophically still. No one breathed. Lily's heart was slamming against her ribs. The man she'd hit was tall. She registered that first, the way you notice something about a person when you're suddenly very close to them and very aware that you've made a terrible mistake. Tall and still. He hadn't recoiled. He hadn't made a sound. He was just standing there with his hand raised slightly from his side, not toward his face, not reaching for her, just raised, like he'd been interrupted mid-thought. He turned his head slowly, met her eyes. And that was when Lily Carter's stomach dropped through the floor of the elevator and kept falling. He was not what she'd expected. She hadn't thought about what she expected, had barely thought at all, but she'd expected someone who would yell, someone red-faced and sputtering, full of righteous indignation, already calculating how to make her sorry. This man wasn't doing any of that. He was looking at her the way you look at something genuinely surprising. Not angry, not shocked in the theatrical sense. More like recalibrating, like she'd introduced a variable into an equation he thought he'd already solved. His cheek had gone red. She could see it. He was, she noticed with a kind of sick clarity, extremely good-looking. Not in the curated, groomed way of the men she saw in this building, men who looked like they'd been assembled by committee. He was good-looking the way some men just are, without apparent effort, in a way that made it worse that she had just hit him. That, he said, in the same low, unhurried voice, was an interesting interpretation. "Excuse me?" Her voice came out smaller than she wanted. "Of the situation." He gestured very slightly at the packed elevator around them, at the 12 people now staring at both of them. "I was talking about the elevator. It's crowded. I said it was tight." He paused. That was all. The silence that followed was the loudest thing Lily had ever heard. Someone behind her, she thought it might be a woman in a red blazer, made a soft, involuntary noise, like a gasp that couldn't commit. Lily's face went from hot to scalding. She opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. She started. The elevator stopped. 23rd floor. Doors opened. Lily grabbed her bag, turned, and walked out of that elevator with every ounce of dignity she had left, which was, by her estimation, almost none. She didn't look back. She didn't need to. She could feel his eyes on her back until the doors closed again, calm and steady, the way a man looks when he has already decided something about you. She walked 4 blocks before she stopped. The night air was warm and thick, the way Manhattan gets in early September when summer refuses to acknowledge that it's supposed to be over. Lily stood on the corner of 6th and 47th with her messenger bag over one shoulder and her phone in her hand and thought, with almost scientific clarity, that actually just happened. She had slapped a stranger. In an elevator, in front of an audience. Because she had assumed. She pressed her palm flat against her sternum, felt her own heartbeat, fast and unsteady. People flowed around her on the sidewalk, everyone moving, everyone with somewhere to be, and she just stood there doing a post-event damage assessment that was not going well. He hadn't done anything wrong. That was the part that kept surfacing. He had been talking about the elevator, and she had just acted, like a spring that had been wound too tight for too long and finally slipped its casing. And he had been calm about it. That was almost worse. If he'd yelled, she could have built some kind of defensive wall around the memory. But he just looked at her with those dark, steady eyes and said that was an interesting interpretation, like she was a puzzle he was mildly curious about. Her phone buzzed. Marcus again. Lily. Mock-ups. She put the phone in her bag, started walking. She had rent to think about. She had her mother's medication bills. She had a job she needed to keep. At a company she was increasingly sure did not deserve her. Working for a man who had spent 6 weeks taking credit for her brain. She didn't have time to think about elevators or strangers or the precise shade of red that had bloomed on someone's cheekbone. She went home. She opened her laptop. She worked until 2 a.m. and sent Marcus 17 mock-up variations with a note that said, "Let me know which direction you'd like to pursue." She went to sleep without eating, and she told herself, firmly, conclusively, that she would never see that man again. Lily Carter had grown up 40 minutes outside of Columbus, Ohio, in a house with a leaking roof that her parents had been meaning to fix since she was 9 years old. They never fixed it. Instead, her mother put a series of increasingly strategic buckets in the upstairs hallway, and Lily had grown up falling asleep to the sound of rain hitting aluminum, which she still, at 30, found oddly comforting. Her father had been a high school art teacher who moonlighted as a wedding photographer and drove a 2003 Honda Civic with a cracked dashboard until it finally gave out entirely when Lily was 17. Her mother had worked in the offices of a regional insurance company for 22 years, long enough to qualify for the pension that was now, along with Lily's contributions, covering the cost of the home nurse and the medication and the physical therapy sessions that were helping, slowly, after the stroke. They were not poor exactly, but they were the kind of family that felt money leaving, always. The kind of family where a car repair was a crisis and a medical bill arrived like a weather event, sudden and devastating, reshaping everything. Lily had gotten a partial scholarship to a design school in Chicago. She'd waitressed every weekend for 4 years to cover the rest. She had graduated with a portfolio that her professors called exceptional and a student loan balance that she thought about, on bad days, the way you think about a chronic illness. Something to be managed rather than solved. She'd come to New York because that's where the work was. She had a good eye and fast hands, and she was willing to grind, which turned out to be most of what the industry actually ran on. She'd landed at Meridian Creative Group 18 months ago, junior level, with the understanding that there was room to grow. There was room. She just wasn't being allowed into it. She liked her apartment, a fifth-floor walk-up in Astoria, with 2 windows that faced west and turned orange and gold for about 40 minutes every clear evening. She liked her co-workers, mostly, Priya from the motion team, Sam who did production and always had inexplicably good snacks, a rotation of interns who looked at Lily like she had figured something out that they were still working on, which she found both flattering and troubling. She did not like Marcus Webb, but she needed him. That was a distinction she'd had to make consciously, deliberately, more than once. The morning after the elevator, the Friday, she arrived at the office at 8:45 with coffee and the faint hope that the previous evening had somehow become less real overnight. It had not. She sat at her desk and worked. The mock-ups were fine. Marcus approved them with a 2-word reply. The day moved the way Fridays in September move, slightly listless, slightly charged, everyone watching the clock while pretending not to. At lunch, she called her mother. "How are you feeling?" Lily asked. "Like myself," her mother said, which was code for, "Not great. But I'm not going to tell you that because you'll worry." Ruth Carter had been using this particular code since Lily was small enough to fit into the space between the washer and the dryer, and Lily had cracked it years ago, but had never said so. It was one of those comfortable shared fictions that keep families functioning. "Amar says you're doing well with the exercises." Amara is an optimist. "Mom, I did the exercises, both sets. My hand still shakes a little when I—" A pause. "It's improving." "I know it is." "Don't worry about me." "I'm not worried," Lily said. "Lily, I'm a little worried." "That's allowed, just a little." She ate a sandwich at her desk and thought about money, and didn't think about elevators, and worked until 5:30 and went home on the N train, standing the whole way, holding the overhead rail while someone else's elbow lived in her personal space, and she breathed through it and did not slap anyone. Progress. Monday arrived the way Mondays do, without asking. Lily was at her desk by 8:30, coffee going cold beside her keyboard. When the building's atmosphere shifted in that specific way, it shifts when something unusual is happening. She'd learned to feel it, the subtle change in the air pressure of an open-plan office. People sitting up straighter, voices dropping, the collective unconscious realignment that happens when someone important arrives. She looked up. Marcus was standing outside his glass office, which he never did. He was wearing his good tie, the dark navy one he saved for client visits. He was also smiling in a way that he usually wasn't capable of before 11, which meant whatever was happening was significant enough to override his natural morning bitterness. Priya appeared at Lily's elbow. Priya, who sat 3 desks over, who had apparently materialized using some kind of lateral movement that Lily hadn't tracked. "Do you know what's going on?" Lily asked her quietly. "Someone from upstairs is coming," Priya murmured, eyes on Marcus's office. "Like the actual upstairs, as in the people who own the building that owns us." "What?" "Apparently there's a parent company situation, some kind of oversight thing. I don't know the details. Sam got it from the receptionist." Priya paused. "They're sending someone, a representative, a big one, apparently." "How big?" "The kind that makes Marcus wear his good tie." Lily looked at the tie again. "That's bad." "That's very bad." The meeting was called for 10. All department heads, all senior creatives. Lily was technically neither, but Marcus pulled her in because she was the lead on the Hartwell project, and apparently it was going to be discussed. She spent the 40 minutes between Priya's warning and the meeting doing exactly what she always did when she was anxious. She worked. She pulled up the Hartwell files, reviewed the concepts, made sure she could speak to every decision she'd made with complete fluency. If her work was going to be in the room, she was going to know it cold. The conference room on the 12th floor had a long glass wall that looked out over the open plan. Lily sat down 2 seats from the end of the table, opened her notebook, and arranged her face into an expression of calm professional engagement. The door opened. Marcus walked in first, then Deborah from accounts, then a few of the senior people Lily recognized but didn't know well, and then someone else walked in, and Lily's entire body went very, very still. He was taller than she remembered, which wasn't fair because she remembered him as already tall. He was wearing a charcoal suit that fit him so precisely it was almost offensive. No tie, collar, open one button. Not the studied casualness of someone performing relaxed, but actual comfort, like someone who had stopped caring about whether he looked like he was trying. He had a phone in one hand and he was sliding it into his breast pocket as he came through the door, already done with it, already present. He had a faint, still visible mark on his left cheek. No, that wasn't... She was imagining it. She had to be imagining it. It had been 4 days. But she wasn't imagining the face. She was not imagining the face. It was him, the man from the elevator, standing in her conference room. And then Marcus said, in his best reverent voice, the voice he reserved for potential revenue, "Everyone, I want to introduce Noah Sinclair, CEO of Sinclair Technologies, majority stakeholder of the Meridian Group. He'll be spending time with us over the next few weeks as part of a quarterly performance review." The room made the sound of people being professionally impressed. Lily made no sound. She had gone completely, perfectly, catastrophically blank. Noah Sinclair looked around the room. He thanked Marcus in a way that was polite without being warm. He sat down at the head of the table with the ease of a man who sits at the head of tables constantly and has lost the ability to notice that he's doing it. He opened a leather portfolio. He clicked a pen, and then his eyes moved down the length of the conference table in a general professional sweep and stopped on Lily. 1 beat, maybe 2. His expression didn't change. Nothing about him changed. It was just a slight, almost imperceptible quality to his stillness, the way you go still when you recognize something unexpected. Then he looked back at his portfolio. Lily realized she was gripping her pen hard enough to leave marks on her fingers. She unclenched. She breathed. She looked at her notebook as though something very interesting was written there, which it was not. Marcus Webb was written there, underlined for reasons she didn't fully remember, followed by what appeared to be an accidentally drawn spiral that took up most of the margin. She was fine. This was fine. She lasted 22 minutes before she became the single most embarrassing person in the room. It happened because the presentation setup was Lily's responsibility. It had been delegated to her 2 days ago, which she had handled, which she had confirmed 3 times. The laptop was connected. The screen was live. The Hartwell concepts were loaded and ready in exactly the right order. What she had not accounted for was that when she reached across the table to advance to the second slide, because Marcus had looked at her expectantly and she'd leaned over, the sleeve of her blazer would catch the power cable of the secondary monitor, which would slide, which would take the laptop with it, which would hit the edge of the presentation cart with a sound like a very expensive mistake. The monitor didn't fall. The laptop didn't fall. Lily lunged forward and caught both of them with her forearms in a move that was objectively impressive in terms of reflexes, but looked, from the outside, exactly like someone having a minor physical breakdown in a business meeting. Paper scattered. Her notebook hit the floor. Her pen rolled under the chair of the CFO, who looked at it the way you look at something you've decided is not your problem. "I've got it," Lily said. Her voice was steady. She thought that was worth noting internally. She gathered everything. She straightened the monitor. She reconnected the cable. She picked up her notebook. She sat back down. The room had gone quiet. In that particular way, it goes quiet when everyone has collectively decided to pretend they didn't see something. Everyone except Noah Sinclair. He was not pretending. He was watching her with an expression that was completely unreadable, or almost completely. There was something at the corners of his mouth that she refused to identify as amusement. "I'm sorry," Lily said to the room. "We'll proceed," Marcus said, in the tone of a man who was going to have very pointed feedback for Lily later. They proceeded. Lily did not look at Noah Sinclair for the remainder of the meeting. She stared at the presentation slides, at her notebook, at the middle distance above Marcus's head. She answered 2 questions about the Hartwell creative direction, directly, clearly, with the fluency she'd prepared. And she saw, because she was watching for it from her peripheral vision, that Noah glanced at her when she spoke. Both times. She did not acknowledge it. When the meeting ended, people moved and gathered their things and spoke in the low, efficient tones of people who have been professional for 90 minutes and need a moment to decompress. Lily was putting her notebook into her bag with the focused energy of someone fleeing a building. "Ms. Carter." She stopped. His voice was exactly as she remembered it, low and even, like something measured. She turned around. They were almost alone in the room. Marcus had followed the others out, probably to perform attentiveness in the hallway, which was a thing he did. Noah Sinclair was standing with his portfolio under one arm, watching her without urgency. "I didn't think I'd see you again," he said. "That makes 2 of us." She said it before she could edit herself. I'm sorry for Thursday, in the elevator. I completely misread the situation and you already apologized, in the elevator. I gave you a very incomplete apology in the elevator, in front of an audience, which I think barely counts. Something shifted in his expression. Not a smile, exactly, more like the shadow of one. "You're right," he said. "It barely counted. I'm giving you the real one now. I'm sorry. It was completely out of line and I had a bad day and I took it out on you, and there's no justification for that." She paused. "I'm sorry." He looked at her for a moment. Just looked, the way he had in the elevator. Like he was reading something. "How's your hand?" he said. She blinked. You hit me pretty hard." She processed this. "My hand is fine." "Good." He picked up his portfolio from the table. "Thank you for the apology, Ms. Carter. The full one." He walked toward the door, stopped. "The Hartwell concepts," he said without turning around. "The ones you spoke to in the meeting. You developed those yourself?" She hesitated for exactly 1 second. "Yes." "I thought so." He said it simply, factually, and walked out. Lily stood in the empty conference room for a moment, alone with the hum of the HVAC system and the feeling that something had just happened that she didn't fully understand yet. She thought that was the end of it. Of course she did. A professional acknowledgement, a real apology accepted. The universe balancing its books and everyone moving on. She was in the middle of designing a navigation component for a client website on Tuesday afternoon, headphones on, completely absorbed in the precise pixel work of getting the hover state right, when Marcus appeared at her desk. She pulled out one earbud. "Lily," Marcus said in the voice he used when he wanted something and was trying to make the wanting of it seem natural. "I need to speak with you about an adjustment to your responsibilities for the next few weeks." She saved her work. "What kind of adjustment?" Noah Sinclair has requested that during his review period he have a senior point of contact from the creative team. Someone he can pull documentation from, schedule walkthroughs with, keep close to the work we're doing. He paused. "He specifically requested you." Lily looked at him. "He requested me specifically." "By name." "By name," she repeated. "I want to be clear that this is an honor, Lily. The Sinclair Group doesn't usually engage this closely at the operational level. It speaks to Marcus." She kept her voice even. "What does this mean for my current project load? We'll redistribute some of it. Priya can take the Fennec account for now, and Sam can... The Hartwell launch is in 6 weeks. I can't hand that off mid-execution. You'll maintain oversight, but your primary bandwidth for the next few weeks will be supporting the CEO review." She said it flatly. "Think of it as a visibility opportunity," Marcus said, in the tone of a man who had decided on the framing and was committed to it. Lily thought about the rent increase. She thought about her mother's physical therapy schedule and the cost of Amara's services and the student loan balance that sat in the back of her mind like a quiet, steady hum. She thought about what it would mean to say no to a visibility opportunity that had come from the man who owned the company that employed her. "When does it start?" she said. "Tomorrow morning? 8 o'clock?" He left before she could ask anything else, which she suspected was intentional. Lily put her earbud back in. stared at the navigation component. The hover state was still wrong. She could see it clearly now. The timing was just slightly off, a fraction of a second too slow. And she pulled up the CSS and started adjusting. She worked for another 3 hours. She did not think about the fact that Noah Sinclair had asked for her by name. She tried very, very hard not to think about it. 8 o'clock Wednesday. She was there at 7:50. His temporary office was on the 14th floor, in the executive suite that normally sat mostly empty. It had a lot of glass and very little personality. A desk, a row of monitors, 2 chairs across from it, a window that looked out over the middle distance of Midtown Manhattan. He was already there. Of course he was. He was standing at the window with a coffee cup that had clearly not been provided by the office. It was from a place she recognized, a small Ukrainian-owned shop 3 blocks over that she went to on mornings when she had the extra $4. He was on the phone, and he held up one finger when she came in. 1 minute, and she set her bag down and stood there feeling mildly like she was waiting outside the principal's office. He finished the call without making it last longer than it needed to. No performative preambles, no unnecessary closing pleasantries. He just said, "That'll work. I'll follow up Thursday," and hung up. He turned. "Miss Carter." "Mr. Sinclair." He gestured to one of the chairs across the desk. She sat. He sat. "You don't want this assignment," he said. It wasn't a question. She opened her mouth to deflect, and he shook his head slightly. "I'm not asking you to defend it or reframe it. I'm just noting that the way you walked in here is not the walk of someone who volunteered for something." She looked at him. He was looking back, direct and unworried, the way people look when they're accustomed to being able to read rooms and don't feel the need to pretend otherwise. "I have an active project that I'm now being pulled away from," she said. "That's my main concern. The Hartwell account. You know about it. I reviewed everyone's current project loads before I confirmed this arrangement. Hartwell is 6 weeks from launch, and you're the primary creative lead." He leaned back slightly. "You're right to be concerned about the handoff. Then why—" She stopped. "Why did I request you specifically?" She didn't answer, which was an answer. "Because in that meeting on Monday, I asked 2 different people about the Hartwell creative direction and got 2 different answers. Neither of them was you, and then when I asked you, you gave me the real one." He said it simply. "I need someone who gives me the real answers. During a performance review, I can't afford to build my understanding of this company's creative output on information that's been—" He paused. "Curated." Lily thought about Marcus's presentation deck, about her color rationale in the client email. "Curated," she said. "Is that a problem for you, working in that capacity?" She considered the question seriously, which she could tell he appreciated. He watched her thinking without rushing her. "No," she said finally. "It's not a problem." "Good." He turned to his monitors. "I'd like to start with a walkthrough of the Hartwell project from the beginning. Every decision point, why you went the direction you did, what alternatives you considered. Not the version that's been presented to the client, the actual process." She pulled out her notebook. "That's going to take a while," she said. "I have time." He glanced at her. "Do you?" She thought about the hover state she'd never finished fixing last night. "Not really, but I'll manage." And something happened at the corner of his mouth, small and brief. "But there." "I'll have someone get you a coffee," he said. "I can get my own coffee." "I know you can. I'm offering." She looked at him. He looked at her. "Okay," she said. She got out her notebook and they started talking about design. She had expected him to be difficult. That was the working assumption she'd carried into the 14th floor, that a billionaire CEO doing a performance review of a creative company he'd acquired would be performatively demanding, that he'd ask questions to demonstrate knowledge rather than gain it, that he would be the kind of person who makes other people feel small as a management strategy. He was not that. He was, and she took her time arriving at this conclusion over the course of their first 3-hour session. Examining it from different angles before she was willing to commit to it, he was genuinely sharp. He asked good questions. He listened to the answers. He didn't pretend to understand things he didn't understand, and he didn't perform modesty about the things he did. He knew almost nothing about design process, and he said so. He said, "Walk me through this like I've never done it, because I haven't." So she did. She talked about the Hartwell brief, what the client had asked for, which was generic and vague, a refresh of their brand identity for a new market positioning. She talked about the research phase, the competitor audit, the consumer perception data she'd pulled. She talked about the 6 different directions she'd explored before landing on the one she'd developed, why each of the others had failed, and what they had failed at specifically. He listened to all of it. He asked about things that surprised her. Not the obvious questions, but the lateral ones. Why did you rule out the third direction so quickly? And when you say the typeface felt wrong, what does that actually mean, technically? And what's the difference between a brand that's aspirational and one that's just expensive? Good questions. Difficult questions, the kind that required her to articulate things she'd previously only understood intuitively. She worked to answer them clearly, and in doing so, she found herself understanding her own work better, which she had not expected. By 11 o'clock, they had covered the first 3 weeks of the Hartwell process. We should break, Noah said. He said it like someone who has learned, probably through bad experience, to schedule breaks rather than power through. I can keep going, Lily said. I need coffee. You said someone was getting coffee. That was 2.5 hours ago. She looked up. The light in the room had changed. The flat morning white had shifted into something warmer, and she realized she'd completely lost track of the time. This happened to her in deep work. She went somewhere and came back. Oh, she said. Yeah. He stood, rolled his shoulders, a human gesture, unexpectedly, and moved toward the door. Come on, there's a place 3 blocks over. She blinked. You want to leave the building? I want coffee that isn't from the pot in the executive kitchen. You know the Ukrainian place on 47th? She stared at him. That's where your cup was from this morning. It's the best coffee within 6 blocks. I did a survey. You did a survey. I was here for 40 minutes before you arrived. I had time. He held the door open. Are you coming? They walked to Vasilenko's, which was what the small Ukrainian coffee shop was called, spelled out in faded gold letters above a green-painted door. The woman behind the counter, mid-60s, silver hair pinned up, the expression of someone who had seen everything, looked at Noah the way she looked at a regular. Twice today? She said. I brought someone, Noah said. What do you want? This last bit to Lily. Americano? Small? He ordered both. He paid. Lily started to pull out her card, and he shook his head once, simply, without making a thing of it, which she appreciated more than she expected. They stood at the small counter along the window. The street outside was busy, the specific Tuesday morning busy of Midtown, purposeful and a little relentless. How long have you been at Meridian? Noah asked. 18 months. Before that? Agency work, smaller studio for 2 years before that. Before that, Chicago. You went to school there? Yeah. She wrapped both hands around the coffee cup. Art school, design track. Do you like it? The work? She looked at him. Why? Because it seems like an important question. Whether you like the thing you spend most of your time doing. I like design, she said carefully. I don't always like the context I do it in. Meaning Meridian. Meaning aspects of Meridian. She caught herself. I probably shouldn't be saying that to the majority stakeholder of Meridian. Probably not, he agreed. He sounded completely unconcerned. But you did say it. I did. So say the rest of it. She looked at her coffee. Outside, a cab laid on its horn for a sustained, dramatic period before giving up. I'm good at my job. I have clear evidence that I'm good at my job. The gap between the quality of my work and the recognition I receive for it is large, and has been for a while. She said it without heat, without the performance of resentment, just factual. Noah was quiet for a moment. Marcus Webb, he said, not a question, an arrival at a conclusion. I didn't say that. You didn't have to. He drank his coffee. I read the Hartwell client emails. The attribution, or lack of it, was notable. Lily said nothing. I'm going to ask you something, and you don't have to answer it. But I'd like you to tell me if you think the Hartwell work is good. She looked at him. That's a strange question. It's a genuine one. She thought about it, not performing modesty, not hedging. Yes, she said. I think it's good. I think it's better than what they asked for, which is what the best work usually is. I think it'll be effective for them for at least 3 years, possibly 5 if they're careful about implementation. Why? She told him. She talked about the specific decisions, the primary color that had seemed risky but would perform better in digital contexts, the typeface pairing that was unusual but legible, the brand architecture that left room for product line expansion. She talked for about 4 minutes without prompting. He listened to every word. "Okay," he said when she finished. "Thank you." "For what?" "For answering honestly." He set down his cup. "Most people tell me what they think I want to hear. It's a waste of everyone's time." She looked at him. "Is that why you asked for me specifically? Because I told you the real thing in the meeting?" "Partly," he said. "What's the other part?" He looked at her for a moment, something in his eyes that she couldn't fully identify. "You weren't afraid of me," he said. "Most people in that building were afraid of me before I walked in the door. You were annoyed that the cable hit the monitor, but you weren't afraid." "I was mortified." "That's different." He picked up both cups to throw them away. "You were embarrassed about the monitor. You're not embarrassed that you slapped me. You wish you hadn't, and you're sorry, but you're not diminished by it." He tilted his head slightly. "That's interesting." Lily held very still. "You're analyzing me." "I analyze everything. It's a personality flaw." He held the door open for her. "Ready?" They walked back to the building. The conversation moved on to logistics, scheduling, which files she'd need to pull for the rest of the week, how they'd handle the Hartwell continuity while she was splitting her attention. Professional, practical, exactly what it was supposed to be. But Lily caught herself halfway back to the building thinking, when was the last time someone asked me if I liked my work? She couldn't remember. By Thursday, she had developed a system. Mornings with Noah on the 14th floor, walkthroughs, documentation, the granular review of the creative work that she was increasingly convinced he actually cared about rather than performing interest in. Afternoons back at her desk, checking in on Hartwell, maintaining the continuity she'd promised Marcus she wouldn't lose. It was a lot. She was tired in the specific way you get tired when you're doing more than your body scheduled, the kind of tired that lives behind your eyes and follows you home. But it was also, she wouldn't have admitted this to anyone, interesting. Noah Sinclair was interesting. Not the way she found good design interesting, not the intellectual absorption of problem solving, but in the more uncomfortable way of something you keep circling back to. She caught herself thinking about things he'd said during the day's walk-through while she was on the subway home. The questions he asked, the way he listened. Priya noticed. "You seem," Priya started on Thursday afternoon, materializing at Lily's desk with a stealth that had ceased to surprise her. "Different." "Different how?" "Like," Priya made a gesture with her hands. "Not as tired as you should be, given that you're working basically double." "I'm exactly as tired as I should be." "You're eating lunch." Lily looked at her. "I eat lunch." "At your desk while working, that's not—" Priya stopped. "Has something changed about the assignment upstairs?" "It's a project review. I'm helping with documentation." "Right, but is it—" Priya chose her next words with visible care. "Is it very terrible?" Lily considered the question more honestly than she would have liked. "No," she admitted. "It's not terrible." Priya's expression evolved through several stages. She said, finally. "Don't me. I'm just, Priya. It's fine. It's completely fine. Carry on." She drifted back to her desk. Lily returned to her screen. She wasn't going to think about why it wasn't terrible. She thought about it a little. The thing was, and she acknowledged this privately, without any intention of doing anything about it, the thing was that being in a room with Noah Sinclair for 3 hours felt like being taken seriously. He paid attention. He asked follow-up questions. He treated her knowledge of her craft as actual knowledge, which should have been the baseline of every professional interaction she'd ever had, but which was, in practice, not. Marcus Webb had worked with her for 18 months, and she was not convinced he knew the difference between branding and identity design. Noah had been in the room with her for 4 cumulative hours and had asked her to explain the philosophy behind responsive color systems, which was both a very niche question and a very good one. She was going to leave it there. That was all that was. On Thursday afternoon after the walkthrough, he stopped her as she was leaving. "You should know," he said, without preamble, "that I spoke to Marcus about the Hartwell attribution." She turned around. "I didn't ask you to do that." "I know you didn't." He said it without apology. "It was relevant to my review." "Mr. Sinclair." "Noah." She paused. "What did you say to him?" "I told him that future communications with Sinclair Group clients about Meridian's creative work should accurately reflect the origination of the work, including which individuals led the development." Lily processed that. "How did he take it?" "About how you'd expect." A pause. "Are you upset that I did it?" She was quiet for a moment, honest. "No," she said. "I'm not upset." "Good." He picked up his phone. "See you tomorrow, Ms. Carter." She was halfway to the elevator when she realized she was smiling. She stopped smiling. She got on the elevator. She told herself firmly, absolutely fine. The Hartwell mock-ups were due for client review in 5 weeks, and she still had 16 decisions to finalize before the packaging concepts could go to production. She had rent due in 12 days. She had her mother to call. She had approximately no time to be anything other than focused, practical, and professionally boundaried. She got home at 8:30. She called her mother. She ate leftover rice standing at the kitchen counter and watched the lights of the building across the way and thought about a question Noah had asked her that morning. "What's the thing you'd design if no one was paying you to design something specific?" She'd deflected. She'd said something about personal projects being hard to carve out time for, which was true, but wasn't the answer. The real answer was that she'd been quietly working, for about 2 years, on a visual system for a nonprofit literacy program in Ohio that one of her college friends ran. No pay. She did it because she believed in it and because it gave her something that client work couldn't quite reach. The feeling of caring completely about what you were making. She hadn't told Noah that. She didn't know why. She washed her bowl, dried it, put it away. She went to bed. She did not dream about elevators. The second week started the way the first had ended, with Lily arriving before 8 and Noah already there, coffee from Vasilenko's on the desk, phone face down in a gesture she'd started reading as "I'm actually here," not performing being here. She'd noticed small things like that. She noticed them the way you notice the particular sound a room makes when someone leaves it. The details you don't consciously track until they're already part of your internal architecture. The morning light on the 14th floor hit the windows differently than it did downstairs. Lily's desk on the 9th floor faced north, which meant she worked in a kind of consistent gray, steady, not unflattering, but flat. The 14th floor caught the eastern light in the early mornings, and it made the whole room feel like something that hadn't fully decided what it wanted to be yet. Possible. That was the word she kept coming back to. The room felt possible. She was unpacking her bag when he looked up from whatever he'd been reading. "You know the literacy nonprofit," he said. She went still. "I'm sorry?" "The one in Ohio. The one you've been doing pro bono design work for." He turned his monitor slightly so she could see it. A small website, clean but clearly underfunded, with a visual identity she recognized the way you recognize your own handwriting. "I was looking at Meridian's employee portfolio documentation. Your entry linked to your personal site, which linked to this." Lily put her bag down. She felt something she couldn't immediately name. Not violation exactly, but a cousin of it. The particular discomfort of having someone find a thing you'd kept quiet on purpose. "That's not," she started. "The mark system is good," he said. "The color palette is doing a lot of work. You solved a low-budget problem with type instead of production value, which is harder than it looks." He set down the paper. "Why didn't you tell me about it?" "Because it's not relevant to the review." "I asked you what you'd design if no one was paying you. You gave me a non-answer." She stood there for a moment, then she pulled her chair out and sat down. "Because it felt like showing someone your diary. It's the work I actually care about. I don't usually—" She stopped. "It's easier to talk about client work. There's distance in it. It didn't work because of this decision. It did work because of that one. It's analytical. The other kind is personal." "Yeah." He nodded and looked at the website for another moment, and then closed the tab without further commentary. Just acknowledged it and moved on, which was, she was going to leave that alone too, more considerate than pressing would have been. "Where do you want to start this morning?" she asked. "Brand governance documentation. I want to understand how decisions get approved and who actually has final authority at the creative level." He picked up his pen. "And I suspect the answer is going to be interesting." It was. That was putting it gently. They worked through the morning in the rhythm they'd developed. Her talking, him listening and questioning, the occasional tangent into adjacent territory that somehow always circled back to something relevant. She'd stopped being surprised by the quality of his attention. She'd started instead to rely on it, which was a different thing and slightly more dangerous. Around 10:30, he took a call he couldn't defer. She could tell by the way he looked at the screen before answering, a specific quality of resignation. He stepped out into the hallway, and Lily stayed at her end of the desk and worked on the Hartwell packaging notes she'd brought upstairs, the ones she owed Marcus by end of day. Through the glass wall, she could see him in the hallway, standing with his back half turned, shoulders set in the particular configuration of someone who is professionally calm and personally not. She wasn't watching him. She was working. She just happened to be able to see him from where she was sitting, which was a fact of geometry rather than intention. The call lasted 11 minutes. She tracked the time without meaning to. When he came back in, he sat down and didn't immediately return to their conversation. He looked at his notes. He uncapped his pen and wrote something down, then crossed it out. He did this twice. "Bad news?" she asked. He looked up. "My daughter was supposed to spend next week with her grandmother. Change of plans." Lily processed this. She had known, in a general company knowledge kind of way, that Noah Sinclair was a single father. It was the kind of detail that circulated in offices, not gossip exactly, more the information that fills in the outline of a public person. She had not thought about what it meant in practice, in the specific daily logistics of his life. "How old is she?" "6. He said it the way people say ages of children, with a particular weight, like the number contains the whole person. "Her name is Maya. Is she—" Lily hesitated. "Is it manageable? The change of plans?" "It's always manageable," he said. "That's not the same as easy." He looked at his notepad. "Her grandmother in Boston was supposed to have her Monday through Thursday. I'll need to adjust some of the review schedule." "That's fine. We can restructure the morning sessions." He looked at her, and for a moment something in his expression was less CEO and more. Human wasn't quite the right word because he'd always been human, but unguarded was closer. Like someone who had just briefly stopped holding themselves at a particular angle. "She's good," he said, apparently to the question she hadn't finished asking. She's a good kid." A pause. "She doesn't sleep well in new places. She'll be with me here, in the apartment I'm renting, and she won't sleep well for the first 2 nights, and then she'll be fine." He said this with the specificity of someone who has done something enough times to know exactly how it goes. "I just need to account for being less functional on Tuesday morning." Lily looked at him. "I'll bring coffee." He blinked. "From Vasilenko's," she said. "If you're going to be running on 3 hours, the building pot is not going to be enough. I'll bring it." He was quiet for a second. "You don't have to do that." "I know." She looked back at her notes. "Where were we?" He told her where they were. They continued. But something had shifted, in the small, nearly imperceptible way that things shift when a person lets you see a piece of their actual life rather than the version they present to rooms. She didn't examine it. She just felt it settle, like a stone in still water. The meeting happened that afternoon. She found out about it the same way she found out about most office developments, through Priya, who had appeared at Lily's desk at 4 o'clock with the energy of someone carrying news they found both alarming and compelling. "You know there's a woman here, right?" Priya said. Lily didn't look up from her screen. "There are several women here. It's an office. I mean a specific woman who came in about an hour ago and went straight up to 14 and hasn't come down." A pause. "She's... Lily, I'm not being dramatic. She is legitimately the most beautiful person I have seen in person. Like, the kind of beautiful that makes you feel like you've been doing your face wrong your whole life." "Why are you telling me this?" Because she asked the receptionist for Noah Sinclair by first name. Not Mr. Sinclair. Noah. Lily saved her file. That doesn't necessarily mean anything. She had his personal cell number. Deborah saw her texting him directly. Priya's voice dropped to register. And she's been up there for 45 minutes. Lily looked up then, not because it meant something. It didn't mean something, but because Priya's expression had shifted into something more carefully watchful, and Priya's carefully watchful expressions were usually worth attending to. I don't know who that is, Lily said, and it's not my business. Right, Priya said. Absolutely right. Very professional. She drifted back toward her desk. She's wearing a dress that probably costs more than my rent. Lily returned to her screen. The packaging notes were fine. They needed one more revision pass on the color callouts, and then they were done. She did the revision. She sent them to Marcus. She put on her headphones. She did not think about who was on the 14th floor. She thought about it a little. She was still at her desk at 5:45 when she heard the elevator open and looked up. Not because she was watching for it, but because the open plan office had thinned out enough that sounds carried differently, and saw, across the room, a woman stepping out of the elevator. Priya had not been exaggerating. This happened sometimes, the way descriptions of extraordinary things occasionally just fail to cover the actual thing. She was tall, with dark hair cut in a severe, expensive line at her jaw, and she moved through the office the way people move when they are used to being looked at and have decided, after long practice, to accept it rather than accommodate it. She wore a dress that was the precise color of deep water, and she carried a small bag that could have been a clutch or could have been something more significant and was probably both. She was not alone. Noah was 3 steps behind her, and Lily registered this with the particular clarity of someone who has been trying not to pay attention and has just been given something unavoidable to pay attention to. He was saying something to the woman. Lily couldn't hear it. The woman laughed, a real laugh, not a polite one, and touched his arm briefly, the easy physical shorthand of 2 people who have a history of touching each other. Then the woman turned and looked across the office with the general survey of someone noting an environment without much interest in it, and her eyes landed on Lily. It lasted a moment. The woman's expression didn't particularly change, just registered. Then she looked away. They went out the front doors. Lily looked back at her monitor. She was tired, she told herself. She needed to go home and eat something real and sleep before her body started issuing more formal complaints about the schedule she'd been keeping. She shut down her computer, packed up her bag, and took the elevator down without waiting for the later crowd. She was on the N train, standing, hanging on to the overhead rail, when her phone buzzed. An unfamiliar number. She almost didn't answer. Then she did. Ms. Carter. Noah's voice. I apologize for calling. I got your number from HR. I should have asked. She shifted her grip on the rail. Around her the train rocked and groaned through the dark. It's okay. What do you need? Tomorrow morning, I need to push back to 9. That's fine. A pause, not a working pause. Something else. The woman you saw leaving the office, he said. Vanessa Cole. Lily opened her mouth to say it wasn't her business. We were together 3 years ago. His voice was even, but the evenness had an edge to it, the sound of someone choosing their words with deliberate care. She heard I was in New York and came to say hello. Another pause. She stayed longer than I expected. You don't owe me an explanation. I know I don't. He said it simply. I'm explaining anyway. The train swayed. Someone pressed into her from the left and she shifted to accommodate it, the automatic physical negotiation of public transit. Is she... Lily stopped, started again. Are you... No, he said, before she'd finished the question. No. The word was quiet and completely final. Okay, Lily said. 9 tomorrow. 9 tomorrow. She hung up. She stared at the scratched metal door of the train car for a while as the stops came and went. She did not think about the word no and how quickly he'd said it. She thought about it the whole ride home. She ate dinner, real dinner, pasta, something she'd actually made rather than assembled from whatever the deli downstairs had left at the end of the day. She called her mother and listened to Ruth describe in significant detail a disagreement she'd had with Amara about the proper method for making chicken soup, which took 19 minutes and involved a level of specificity about aromatics that suggested Ruth Carter was feeling more like herself than she had in weeks. Lily listened to all of it and said, mm-hmm, in the right places, and felt, for those 19 minutes, something close to uncomplicated. When she hung up, she sat in the quiet of her apartment and let herself think about it properly for a few minutes, because she had learned at some point in her adult life that avoiding a thought entirely was less effective than just looking at it directly. She was not in a way she'd acted on, not in a way she planned to act on, but in the quiet, measurable way of something she could observe about herself. She was interested in Noah Sinclair, as more than a complicated professional situation, as more than the man she'd slapped in an elevator and was now spending her mornings with. That was the fact, clean and inconvenient. She filed it. She did not plan to do anything about it. She had 18 very good reasons not to do anything about it, starting with the power differential and ending with the 6 years of work she'd put into building a career that could still be disrupted by whatever this was. She washed her pasta bowl. She looked at her homework, the nonprofit brand work she did on evenings when she had time, which was not tonight. She went to bed at 10:15. She slept. She dreamed about something she didn't remember in the morning. Tuesday arrived with clouds and the particular gray that New York does in September when it means it, the kind of light that makes everything look slightly unresolved. Lily picked up 2 coffees from Vasilenko's. Tatiana, the silver-haired woman, raised an eyebrow when Lily ordered 2 but said nothing, and took the elevator to 14. Noah was on the phone when she came in. Maya was sitting on the far end of the long credenza, cross-legged, a book open in her lap, a pair of small headphones around her neck. She was 6 years old, which Lily had been told, but somehow she had still managed to construct a mental image of a child more ambiguously aged. Maya Sinclair at 6 was a very specific person, dark-haired, serious-eyed, with the focused expression of someone deep in a book who has peripherally registered a new person entering the room and is taking their time about deciding what to do with that information. She looked up. She looked at Lily. She looked back at her book. "Hi," Lily said. Maya looked up again. "Hi." Then back to the book. Lily set down the coffees and sat at her end of the desk and opened her notebook and respected the kid's decision to defer engagement, which seemed like the right call. Noah finished his call. "Thank you," he said, nodding at the second coffee cup. He looked tired. Not collapsed, nothing dramatic, but the specific kind of tired that lives in the eyes. The 2 bad nights he'd predicted. "She okay?" Lily said, low. "She's fine. She was up at 4 and we watched a cartoon about marine biology for an hour and a half. She knows more about bioluminescent plankton than I do now." He picked up his coffee. "Which isn't hard." "Dad," Maya said this without looking up. "Dinoflagellates." "Right," Noah said. "Those." Maya turned a page. Lily looked at the kid, then at Noah. He met her eyes with an expression that was trying not to be something warmer than it should be, and not fully succeeding. They got to work. Maya was, as it turned out, quite good at existing in a working environment. She stayed on her end of the credenza and progressed through her book, and occasionally ate from a small container of blueberries she produced from her backpack. At one point she fell asleep, just tipped sideways against the window glass with her book still open in her hand, and Noah reached over without interrupting the sentence he was speaking and placed his jacket over her. The automatic economy of a parent who has done this enough times to do it without thinking. Lily noticed this and went back to her notes and did not comment on it. Around 11, Maya woke up and wanted lunch. "There's a place downstairs," Noah said to Lily. "Would you—" He stopped. "You don't have to." "What do you want?" Lily said to Maya. Maya considered this with the gravity of a very important decision. "Grilled cheese?" "I know a place," Lily said. They went to the diner on 46th, the old kind with laminate menus and a counter that ran the length of the room, and a waitress named Gloria, who called everyone Han without apparent consciousness of doing it. Maya sat between them in the booth and ordered a grilled cheese with exacting specifications. No tomato, butter, on the outside, not the inside, cut in triangles, not squares, and a chocolate milk, and then looked around the diner with the alert watchfulness of a child who is accustomed to new environments and has developed strategies for them. "Do you work with my dad?" Maya asked Lily. "I do. Right now, yes." "Are you his assistant?" "Sort of. Lily said, and then, because it wasn't quite right, more like, I help him understand how the company works, what people here do. Maya absorbed this. He doesn't know how it works? He knows how the numbers work. I help with the other part. The art part? Lily looked at her. Yeah, actually, the art part. He can't draw, Maya said. This was not an insult, just factual. Maya, Noah said. It's true. To Lily. He tries. It just looks like the drawing I made when I was 4. She considered. I'm better now. What do you like to draw? Lily asked. This opened something. Maya talked about drawing. She liked animals specifically, and was working on a book of animals she'd made up herself. Combinations, like a bird with deep-sea fish coloring, or a cat with the body plan of a crab. She talked about this with the detailed enthusiasm of a child who has spent real time on a thing and wants someone to actually hear about it. Lily asked questions. Real ones. Not the performed interest adults sometimes direct at children like a courtesy function, but actual curiosity. What did the bird-fish hybrid eat? Had Maya figured out the wing-to-body ratio? Did it live in water or air or both? Maya answered all of them. She ate her grilled cheese, triangles, correct? And talked about her imaginary fauna with increasing speed and specificity, while Noah sat across the booth and watched this exchange with an expression that Lily was deliberately not looking at. When they left the diner, Maya walked between them on the sidewalk and took both their hands without preamble, the unself-conscious physical logic of a 6-year-old navigating a crowd. Lily let her hand be held. It weighed nothing. It felt like something. They went back to the office. Maya returned to her credenza with renewed energy and began, apparently, drawing one of her imaginary animals in a notebook she'd produced from her backpack. The afternoon session covered Meridian's internal review process, dry material, organizational structure, the kind of administrative architecture that put most people to sleep. Noah did not go to sleep. He asked pointed questions and made notes and twice said, "That's wrong about something." Not harshly, just precisely, the way someone talks when they've found an error that matters. At 3:30, Lily's phone vibrated. She glanced at it. A text from a number she hadn't saved but recognized from the previous evening. One word. Dinner? She stared at the screen for a moment, looked up. Noah was looking at his monitor, apparently absorbed in something. He had not looked at his phone. Another buzz. A question, not an expectation. You can say no. She looked across the desk at him. He was still not looking at her, but there was a specific quality to his not looking that she recognized as waiting. She typed back, "What about Maya?" A pause. Then, "She's with the building's family suite tonight, supervised, secure. I've used them before." Lily set her phone face down. She picked up her pen. She looked at the organizational chart she'd been annotating. She thought about 18 good reasons. She picked up her phone. Okay. She put it back down. Nothing in the room changed. He was still looking at his monitor. She was still looking at her chart. Maya was still drawing a creature with the head of an owl and the legs of a deer. But something in the air had shifted almost imperceptibly, like a barometric change before weather arrives, like the half-second before the lights come up in a dark theater. She didn't examine it. She just breathed through it and went back to work. At 6 o'clock, she and Noah sat in a small Italian restaurant 4 blocks from the building. Not fancy, not performing itself, red-checked tablecloths and wine in juice glasses, and the smell of actual garlic from an actual kitchen. The kind of place that exists in New York because someone's grandmother started it 30 years ago, and the food is too good to fail even when the rent keeps climbing. They ordered without consulting each other too much. He got the linguine, she got the gnocchi. They split the bread before it was gone. "How long has she been with you full-time?" Lily asked. She knew she was asking about Maya. He knew she was asking about Maya. 2 years, he said. Her mother and I... He stopped. Started differently. We were together for 4 years. We were bad together, honestly. Different things from each other, different ways of living. When Maya was born, we tried to make it work, but we were just making each other worse. He looked at his wine. Elena moved to London when Maya was 3, by choice. She's not absent. She calls. There are visits. But the day-to-day is mine. He said it without bitterness. With a kind of settled acceptance. The way people talk about things they've grieved long enough to stop actively grieving. I wasn't sure at first. Whether I could do it, I hadn't. He paused, and Lily had the impression he was saying something he didn't usually say. I hadn't been around enough when Maya was small. Work. The company was at a critical stage, and I told myself that was the reason. And it was a reason, but it wasn't the whole reason. I was easier to be at work than to be present with something that required more of me than I knew how to give. The restaurant hummed around them. Someone at the table behind Lily laughed at something. What changed? She asked. Elena left, he said, and I was suddenly the only one. He looked at his glass. And Maya, she wasn't angry, which somehow made it worse. She just adapted. She's always adapting. She's always figuring out the rules of the new environment and working with them. He looked up. She does that because she had to, because the adults in her life weren't stable enough for her not to. He said it plainly, like a diagnosis. I know that. He stopped. I'm working on being better at it. Lily looked at him for a moment. She seems okay, she said. Maya, I know that's not a deep observation, but from the outside she seems genuinely okay. She is, mostly. He picked up his fork. She's resilient. I'd rather she didn't have to be. Yeah, Lily said. I know that feeling. He looked at her. My mom had a stroke 14 months ago, she said. She's recovering. She's doing well, actually. But the first few months, I would call her, and she'd say I'm fine, and I would know she wasn't fine, and there was nothing I could do about it from here except send money and call every day and try to be enough across 800 miles. She looked at the bread. She's resilient, too. I'd rather she didn't have to be. The silence between them was the comfortable kind, not a gap to fill, just space. Is that why you're still at Meridian? He asked after a moment. The money. She looked at him. That's personal. You don't have to answer. Partly, she said. The salary's not great, but it's consistent. And there are reasons I need consistent right now. The medical bills. I didn't tell you that. No, He looked at her directly. HR does aggregate compensation reviews. When I requested you for the assignment, I reviewed the standard package information. Your salary relative to your experience level and output is... He stopped. I'm sorry, that's an intrusive thing to say. Is it wrong? She said. No, it's not wrong. Marcus pays me what he pays me because he knows I need the job, she said. Not angry, just factual. That's how it works. That's how it always works. The people who need it most have the least leverage. She looked at her gnocchi. It's fine. I'm managing. You shouldn't have to just manage. A lot of people shouldn't have to just manage, she said. I'm not a special case. I know. He looked at her. I'm still saying it. She met his eyes. The restaurant light was warm and low, the kind of light that makes everyone look better than they do in offices. And she was aware of this and aware that she was aware of it, which did not help. Why did you call me last night? She said. About Vanessa. He held her gaze. Because I didn't want you to misread the situation. Like an elevator, she said. Something happened in his expression. Not a smile exactly, but the possibility of one. Yeah, he said, like an elevator. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she looked at her plate. You should know, she said, that I'm not... She stopped, restarted. Whatever this is, I'm not going to be reckless with my job. Or with... She stopped again. I'm not good at being reckless. I know, he said. Do you? You've been careful about everything since the first morning. The way you talk about the work, the way you navigate. He gestured vaguely. The whole situation. You're not reckless. You're the opposite of reckless. Is that a compliment? It's an observation. A pause. It's also slightly a compliment. She picked up her wine. Okay. Okay, he said. They ate. They talked. About other things, easier things. He'd grown up in Portland, which she hadn't known. His mother was a nurse, which she also hadn't known. He'd started coding at 12 and built his first real product at 19 in a dorm room and had been, for a period he described as financially catastrophic, genuinely broke. I don't believe you, Lily said. I slept on my business partner's couch for 4 months, he said. His couch was in a studio that smelled like fish sauce for reasons we never identified. I ate cereal for dinner more nights than not. And now you're the majority stakeholder of a company reviewing its own design division. And now I own 7 of them, he said. Not boasting, just accurate. It doesn't feel like the same life sometimes. He looked at his glass. It doesn't feel like the same person, honestly. Is that bad? I don't know yet, he said. Ask me in 10 years. She looked at him. He looked back. Outside, the city moved past the restaurant window in its usual indifferent way, cabs and pedestrians and the specific yellow of streetlights beginning to matter as the evening deepened. I should go, she said. It's almost 9. I'll get you a car. I can take the train. I know you can. He flagged down the server. I'm getting you a car. She let him. She was tired enough that the argument felt like more work than it was worth, and there was something, she acknowledged this privately, something that felt against her better judgment like being taken care of, which she was not used to, which made it dangerous. The car came. She put on her coat. He walked her out. On the sidewalk, in the September night, he stood with his hands in his pockets and looked at her and didn't say anything for a moment. Thank you for today, he said finally. For lunch, for Maya. She's easy to like, Lily said, which was true. She talked about the imaginary animals the whole car ride home, he said. She asked me if you were coming back tomorrow. Lily felt something pull in her chest, small and warm and inconvenient. What did you tell her? I told her probably yes. He tilted his head slightly. Was that right? She looked at him. The car idled at the curb. The city exhaled around them. There was no good reason to be standing here for an extra moment, and they were standing here anyway. Yeah, she said. That was right. She got in the car. She watched him standing on the sidewalk, hands still in his pockets, until the car turned the corner and she couldn't see him anymore. She looked out at the city going by. The lights multiplying and blurring, the storefronts and the traffic, and the anonymous lit windows of 1,000 lives going on behind glass. She was in serious trouble, and she knew it. She knew it the same way she'd known, at 22, that she was going to move to New York with $1,100 and no connections, and a portfolio she hoped was good enough. Not because the logic was clean, but because the alternative was turning away from something real, and that, she had always found, was the thing she could least afford to do. The car crossed the bridge. The lights of Manhattan receded behind her. She looked at her hands. She thought about what careful people did when they were starting to be less careful than they'd planned to be. She thought about how long it had been since something had scared her in the specific way that hope scares you. Not because it might hurt, but because it might not. She thought about a 6-year-old girl with a book of imaginary animals, and a father who was, against all his instincts, letting himself be known. The car pulled up to her building. She got out. She walked up 5 flights. She stood at her kitchen window and looked out at the west-facing view, the one that turned gold for 40 minutes on clear evenings. It was night now, the gold long gone, just the ambient light of a city that never fully darkened. She stayed at the window for a while, then she went to bed, and this time she knew exactly what she was dreaming about even before sleep arrived. She told herself it was just dinner. One dinner, a conversation, a car home. The kind of evening that professionals had all the time without it meaning anything beyond its own boundaries. She had been tired, and it had been warm, and the restaurant light had done what restaurant light does, and none of that added up to anything she needed to restructure her life around. This was what she told herself on Wednesday morning, walking to Vasilenko's with her hands in her jacket pockets, the September air finally conceding to something cooler and more honest. This was the internal monologue she ran while Tatiana made 2 Americanos without being asked, because Lily had apparently become a regular in the span of 2 weeks, which was the kind of thing you didn't notice until it had already happened. She told herself it was just dinner, and she almost believed it until she walked into the 14th floor and Noah looked up from his laptop and said, simply, "Good morning." And something in her chest did the thing it had been doing for several days now, the small, involuntary shift, like a compass needle finding north when it wasn't expecting to. She put his coffee down. She sat. She opened her notebook. "Good morning," she said. They worked. The thing about spending 3 hours a day across a desk from someone is that you learn them sideways. Not the way you learn someone when you're trying to learn them, asking direct questions and filing the answers, but the way you learn someone's handwriting or their driving, the small behavioral facts that accumulate without announcement. Lily learned that Noah refilled his own water glass every 45 minutes, with the regularity of someone who'd been told to do it by a doctor and had actually listened. She learned that when he was genuinely thinking about something, he clicked his pen twice and then held it still, and if you waited through that pause, whatever came out was worth waiting for. She learned that he had two different kinds of silence, one that was processing, one that was deciding, and they felt different if you paid attention. She was paying too much attention. She knew that. Wednesday and Thursday moved through their established rhythm. Documentation, walkthroughs, the granular excavation of Meridian's creative infrastructure that was Noah's stated reason for being there. The work was real, and the work was interesting, and Lily was good at it, which helped. It gave her somewhere to put the attention that was otherwise doing things she hadn't authorized. Maya was in the building both days, colonizing her end of the credenza with increasing confidence. By Thursday, she had brought a second book, a small pouch of colored pencils, and a particular red throw pillow from somewhere Lily didn't ask about, which she arranged against the window glass as a backrest. She had, in the specific territorial logic of children, made the space hers. She also talked to Lily more. Not constantly, not in a way that interrupted the work, but in the way that children talk when they've decided someone is safe. Little offerings of information dropped into quiet moments. She mentioned that her favorite color used to be purple, but was now specifically the color of the ocean in the early morning when it's still kind of gray, which she demonstrated with two colored pencils layered together. She mentioned that at her school in San Francisco she had a best friend named Cora who could hold her breath for 42 seconds. She mentioned once, quietly, while Noah was on the phone, that she didn't really like the apartment they were staying in because it didn't have any good window seats, and then looked at Lily with the assessing expression of someone checking whether this confidence had been misplaced. "Window seats are important," Lily said. Maya nodded with the seriousness of someone being understood. "My room at home has one. It's my reading spot." A pause. "Dad put a cushion on it. It took him 3 tries to get the right one." Lily glanced at Noah, still on his call, doing the specific kind of pacing that meant he was trying to talk someone down from something. 3 tries? The first one was too thin. The second one was a weird color. The third one was... Maya made a gesture that somehow conveyed correct, finally. "I kept the tag so I could tell him what it was called. It's called Storm Cloud." "Does he usually take 3 tries?" "With most things," Maya said, returning to her pencils. "But he keeps going until he gets it right." She said it without looking up, casual, like she was reporting the weather, like it was just a known fact about how her father operated. Lily looked back at her notebook. She thought about that for the rest of the morning in the part of her brain that ran quietly behind the professional part. Friday arrived, and with it something Lily hadn't prepared for. She was at her desk on the 9th floor, a rare afternoon downstairs, catching up on the Hartwell packaging revisions that couldn't wait, when she heard the elevator open and looked up out of the reflexive habit she'd developed and didn't love in herself. And it wasn't Noah. It was Vanessa Cole. She was alone this time. Same quality of presence, same deliberate ease of movement, but there was something different about her expression today. Less sealed, more purposeful. She said something to the receptionist, and the receptionist picked up the phone, and then Vanessa turned and looked across the office, and her eyes went directly to Lily. Not a general scan. Directly to Lily. She walked over. Lily did not look away. She had learned early that looking away first was a thing you couldn't take back. "Lily Carter," Vanessa said. Not a question. "Yes." Vanessa looked at her. A full, frank assessment, the kind that didn't pretend to be something else. She was even more striking up close, which Lily noted with a kind of detached acknowledgement, the way you note something factual about weather. "I'm Vanessa Cole," she said. "I know who you are." Something moved across Vanessa's face. Not displeasure. More like recalibration. Like she'd expected a different response. She pulled out the chair across from Lily's desk and sat down without being invited, which Lily noted but didn't challenge. "I wanted to talk to you," Vanessa said. "Okay," Lily said. "I know about the assignment, the review. I know you've been spending time with Noah. She said his name with the casual ownership of someone who's been saying it for years and doesn't need to think about it. I'm not here to make this dramatic. I just think you should know some things. I think, Lily said, that whatever you're about to tell me is probably more useful to you than to me. Vanessa paused. Then, and Lily hadn't expected this, she almost smiled. You might be right, she said, but I'm going to say it anyway. She leaned forward slightly. Noah is not an easy man to be with. She searched for the word. He's all the way in or all the way out. There's no middle register with him. And when he's all the way in, it's extraordinary. It's the most seen you've ever felt in your life. She said it without sentimentality, just accurately. And then something happens. Work, usually, or fear. He doesn't know he does it, but he pulls back. He goes somewhere internal you can't follow, and she looked at Lily. You're just alone in a life you've rearranged for two people. The office continued around them, the low murmur of other people's workdays. We were together for 3 years, Vanessa continued, and for most of it, I felt like I was the most important person in the room, until I wasn't. And the transition between those two things was, she stopped. It wasn't his fault. He's not cruel. He just disappears. And you're left wondering what you did, and the answer is nothing. You did nothing. He just went away for a while. Lily held her gaze. Why are you telling me this? Because I can see it from the outside, Vanessa said. The way he looks at you. She said it simply. I came here on Monday because I don't know what I thought, that I could walk back in and something would still be there. She looked down at her hands for a moment. It wasn't. It was obvious immediately that it wasn't. She looked back up. And instead I saw him look at someone the way he used to look at me. And I thought, she should probably know what she's getting into. The silence stretched. I'm not getting into anything, Lily said. Okay, Vanessa said, not dismissive, just noting it. I work with him. I have a job to do, and then the assignment ends and... Okay, Vanessa said again, in exactly the same tone. Lily stopped talking. Vanessa stood. She picked up her bag. He's better than he was, she said, at the end, like a postscript she'd decided to include. With Maya, I mean. He's much better than he was. Whatever else he is, he's good with her now. She said it like it mattered to her, which told Lily something about the kind of person she actually was, underneath the expensive dress and the careful exterior. That's worth something. She left. Lily sat at her desk for a moment without moving. Around her, the office did what offices do. Continued, indifferent. Priya appeared. Of course she did. What? Priya said, very quietly, looking at the elevator doors. Was that? She wanted to talk. About what? Things, Lily said. Priya looked at her for a long moment. Are you okay? I'm fine, Lily said. She picked up her pen. I have mock-ups to finish. Priya left slowly, looking back once. Lily stared at the Hartwell file on her screen and thought about, he's all the way in or all the way out, and thought about the way he'd said no on the phone when she'd barely finished the question, and thought about 3 tries to find the right cushion for a window seat. She thought about how the most honest thing she could do was acknowledge that she was already somewhere she hadn't planned to be and decide what to do from there. She worked until 6:30. She finished the mock-ups. She sent them to Marcus and CC'd the client, which she'd started doing since Noah's conversation with Marcus about attribution, and which Marcus had not objected to because he couldn't. She went home. She did not go to the 14th floor to say goodnight. She called her mother. She did not mention any of this because her mother would listen to every word of it and then ask 2 questions that would cut directly to the thing Lily was avoiding, and Lily was not ready for that. Saturday, she worked on the nonprofit project, spread out on her apartment floor, paper in her laptop and a mug of tea, building out the visual system for a new program the literacy organization was launching. It was good work. She lost herself in it the way she always did, the clean absorption of a problem that mattered and a solution that was hers entirely. At 2 in the afternoon, her phone buzzed. She looked at it with her hand still covered in pencil dust. Maya wants to know if there's a museum with animals in it. She means taxidermy, I think. She wants to draw them from real life. Lily stared at this message for a moment. Then she typed back, American Museum of Natural History, 4th floor. She'll need time. A pause. Then, "Are you free?" She looked at her floor, at the nonprofit work spread around her, at the mug of tea going cold. She should not be free. Professionally, the distance between her and Noah Sinclair during the weekend was something she should be maintaining actively and deliberately. "What time?" she typed. They met at the museum at 3:30. Maya had a new sketchbook. Noah had apparently taken her to an art supply store that morning, and she had chosen a hardcover sketchbook with a blue cloth cover that she held with both hands going up the museum steps, as though it was something that required care. She also had a selection of pencils in a small case that she'd organized by hardness, which she showed Lily immediately upon seeing her. "He let me pick everything," Maya said. "Did you need all of them?" Lily asked. "I need the H range for the lighter animals and the B range for the darker ones," Maya said, with complete technical confidence. Lily looked at Noah. "Where did she learn that?" "YouTube, probably," he said. "She learns most things from YouTube. It's mildly terrifying." "It's fine," Maya said, already moving toward the entrance. "Come on." They went to the Hall of North American Mammals first because Maya had done research. She had a list, an actual list in her sketchbook of the specific animals she wanted to draw, which she consulted with the seriousness of a professional with a shot list. She positioned herself in front of the bison diorama, opened her sketchbook, selected a pencil, and began to draw with focused concentration that made several passing adults stop and look twice at a 6-year-old working with that quality of stillness. Lily and Noah stood slightly behind her and let her work. "She did research," Lily said. "She asked me to find images of every diorama in the 4th floor so she could plan," he said, "at 7:30 this morning." "On a Saturday?" "I was already up." He shrugged slightly. "She's usually up before me. She comes and sits on the edge of my bed and doesn't say anything. Just sits there. I don't know if she's waiting for me to wake up or if she just wants company. Either way, I'm awake within about 4 minutes. Lily watched Maya's pencil moving across the page. The bison was emerging in careful, deliberate lines. Not childlike. Not yet the work of someone trained, but something more than that. The work of someone who looked before they drew, who saw the animal before they tried to put it on paper. "She's good," Lily said. "I know." He said it with a kind of quiet amazement, like he'd never fully get used to it. "I don't know where it came from. Not from me. You're sharper than you give yourself credit for. Visually, I mean. The questions you've been asking all week." She stopped. "What?" "The way you think about design problems. You don't have the vocabulary yet, but the underlying spatial logic is there. You can tell when something is wrong. You just can't always say why." He looked at her. "You've been thinking about this." "I think about a lot of things," she said. "I know you do." He was quiet for a moment. They watched Maya add the shoulder hump of the bison in careful strokes, erasing once, starting again. "Vanessa came to see you." Lily didn't react visibly. "She came to the office, yes." "She told me." He kept his eyes on Maya. "She texted me afterward. She said she wanted me to know she'd done it." A pause. "What did she say?" Lily considered. "She was honest," she said finally. "I'll give her that. What did she say about me?" He asked it directly without pretense. "She said you go all the way in or all the way out." Lily kept her voice neutral. "That when you pull back, you don't warn anyone." He was quiet. Maya turned a page and started on the elk in the adjacent diorama. "She's not wrong," he said. "I know. Does that—" He stopped. "Does it what?" He looked at her then. Directly, the way he had in the elevator, the way he had across the conference table on that first morning, like he'd decided to stop managing the angle. "Does it change anything?" Lily held his gaze. "I don't know yet," she said honestly. "Ask me later." He nodded as though this was a reasonable answer, as though he understood that "I don't know yet" was not the same as no. They moved through the hall at Maya's pace, which was slow and thorough. She spent 14 minutes on the elk. She spent 22 on the mountain lion because the mountain lion was, in her words, structurally complex, and she wanted to get the shoulder angles right. She showed Lily the drawing partway through and asked what was wrong with the foreleg. Lily looked at it. "The joint is sitting too high. The elbow of a cat is closer to the body than you think." She found a pencil in Maya's case,
the lightest one, a 2H, and on a blank page in the back of the sketchbook, she drew the basic skeletal outline of a cat's foreleg. Fast, rough, but accurate. See how the breakpoint sits here?
Maya studied it. She looked at the mountain lion. She looked at the drawing. Oh, she said, with the specific satisfaction of a correction that made something click. She went back to her sketchbook and fixed the leg. Noah was watching over Maya's shoulder. He glanced at Lily. She looked back at him. Neither of them said anything. They finished in the mammal hall at 5. Maya wanted the ocean life floor next, and they were halfway there when she announced she was hungry. There was a cafe in the museum, and they sat at a small table with a pretzel and an apple juice for Maya and coffees for the adults. And Maya opened her sketchbook and kept drawing while she ate, which meant the pretzel sat neglected for 10 minutes until Noah put it back in front of her with the wordless patience of someone who has done this exact thing many times. Maya ate a bite and kept drawing. "Can I see?" Lily asked. Maya pushed the sketchbook across the table. She'd moved on from the museum animals. She was drawing something from imagination, the birdfish hybrid she'd described at the diner, more developed now. It had wide pectoral fins like wings, and the coloring was all ocean gradients, and the eye was the eye of something from deep water. It was genuinely interesting. Not just for a 6-year-old. Interesting. "Maya," Lily said. This is really good." Maya looked up. She didn't perform modesty or wave it off. She looked at Lily with the clear eyes of someone who takes their own work seriously and wants to know if the feedback is real or polite. "Which part?" "The eye. And the way the fins sit against the body. The transition from the fish scale texture to the feather texture in the wing area. You solved a real structural problem there." Maya looked at the drawing. "I tried it 3 ways before this." "That's usually how it works," Lily said. "Dad says that too." "Your dad is right about some things," Lily said, not looking at Noah. "Most things," Maya said, correcting her, and went back to drawing. Noah said nothing, but when Lily glanced up, he was looking at the middle distance with the expression of a man who is holding something still, because if he doesn't, it will move too fast. They left the museum at 6:30. The evening had come all the way in by then, the sky a deep gray blue above the park, the lights of Central Park West multiplying in the damp air. Maya walked between them again, by now apparently having decided this was simply the correct configuration. She was tired in the way children get tired when they've been wholly absorbed in something for hours. Not cranky, just slow, leaning slightly as she walked. At the corner of 77th, she took Lily's hand without looking up. Lily led her. She looked straight ahead at the crosswalk signal. They walked half a block and then Noah's phone rang. A work call, one he couldn't defer, his expression shifting into the specific closed quality of something professional and probably complicated. He stopped walking and looked at Lily with a question he didn't ask out loud. "Go," Lily said. "We're fine." He stepped a few feet away and answered. Lily and Maya kept walking slowly. Maya was still drawing in her head, Lily could tell. She had the interior expression of someone continuing a project behind their eyes. "Are you going to keep coming to the office?" Maya asked. "For a few more weeks," Lily said. "And then?" "And then I'll be back on my regular floor." Maya was quiet for a moment, processing this with the deliberate care she brought to most things. "Will you still come to the museum?" Lily looked at her. The question was simple and completely serious. "I don't know," she said, honestly. "That depends on a few things." "What things?" "Grown-up things," Lily said. "The kind that are complicated." "Dad always says that." "Well," Lily said, "your dad and I apparently have that in common." Maya looked at her. The crosswalk signal changed. They crossed. "I hope you keep coming," Maya said on the other side of the street. Simply. Not as a manipulation, not as a performance. Just offered, plain and sincere, the way children offer things when they mean them. Lily's chest did something complicated. She didn't look down at Maya for a second because she needed a moment to arrange her face. "Me too," she said. Noah caught up with them at the next corner, phone back in his pocket, looking like the call had been the kind that leaves a residue. "Everything okay?" Lily asked. "It will be. Tomorrow problem." He looked at Maya. "Ready to go home?" "Lily hopes she keeps coming to the museum," Maya reported. "She said so." Noah looked at Lily. Lily looked at the middle distance. "Is that right?" he said. She asked a direct question, Lily said. She does that. I noticed. A cab pulled up, apparently summoned by some app she hadn't seen him open. He held the door for Maya, then looked at Lily. Can I take you home? I'll get the train. Lily. He said her name in a way he hadn't used before, and not her title, not professional address, just her name. Let me take you home. She looked at him. The cab idled. The city moved past. Okay, she said. She got in. They dropped Maya at the building first, the same supervised family suite, and Maya went with the particular resignation of a child who has calculated that arguing is not worth it, but wants this noted. She hugged Lily before she went in, quick and tight, and then followed the building's childcare coordinator without looking back, which Lily thought was the exit strategy of someone with dignity. The cab continued south. They sat in the back seat with the particular quiet of two people who are aware of how much space is not between them. I need to tell you something, Noah said. She waited. The review ends in 10 days. He was looking straight ahead at the traffic. I'll be in San Francisco by the end of the month. And I want to be clear about... He stopped. Started again. I want to be honest with you about the fact that I'm aware of the position I've put you in, professionally. The assignment was my decision, the dinners were my... He stopped again. I know what it looks like from where you're standing, and I know your reasons for being careful. You've thought about this, Lily said. I've thought about little else, he said. For about 9 days. She looked at him. His profile in the passing streetlights. The jawline, the slight tension there, the way he held himself when he was being honest about something that cost him something. What are you actually saying? She asked. He turned to look at her. I'm saying that I know I have no right to ask you for anything. I know you have a job and a life and 18 good reasons to leave this exactly where it is. And I'm also... He held her gaze. I'm also saying that I haven't wanted something for myself in a long time. Not something that wasn't about work or Maya or the company, just something for myself. A pause. And I'm aware that saying that is not fair to you. The cab stopped at a light. Outside, the city poured past like water. No, Lily said. It's not fair. I know. And you're saying it anyway. Yeah, he said. I am. She looked at him for a long moment. Outside, the light changed. The cab moved. The end of the review, she said slowly. When the assignment is over. When the professional... She gestured. When that's not the situation anymore. He was very still. Ask me then, she said. Whatever you want to ask me then. He held her eyes. Something in his expression did the thing she'd learned to read. Not the smile itself, but the space just before it, the place where something softened. Okay, he said quietly. Okay, she said. They didn't talk for the rest of the ride, but it wasn't the silence of two people avoiding something. It was the silence of two people who have said the real thing and don't need to cover it with noise. The cab stopped outside her building in Astoria. She had her hand on the door. Lily, he said. She looked back. The nonprofit work, he said. The literacy program. The visual system you're building for them. He held her gaze. Don't stop doing that. She blinked. I wasn't planning to. I know, I'm just... He looked like he was reaching for the right word and couldn't quite get there. I looked at it again. I keep looking at it, actually. It's the best thing in your portfolio. She sat with that for a second. The client work is more polished. I didn't say polished, he said. I said best. She didn't have an answer for that. She got out of the cab. She walked into her building without looking back. She climbed 5 flights. She unlocked her door. She stood in her kitchen in her coat and didn't immediately take it off. She just stood there in the quiet of her apartment and felt the full weight of the last 3 weeks. The elevator, the conference room, the coffees, and the walkthroughs, and the diner, and the museum, and the cab, and all the small moments accumulating into something she didn't have a clean name for yet. She thought about Vanessa Cole sitting across her desk saying, "When he's all the way in, it's extraordinary." She thought about what it meant that she wasn't afraid of that the thing Vanessa had said as a warning landed instead as something else. She finally took her coat off. She looked at the nonprofit files spread on her floor from the morning. Still there, waiting,
her real work, the thing that was hers in the clearest way she had. She sat down on the floor and picked up her pencil.
She worked until midnight, and it was the best work she'd done in months, and she didn't let herself think too hard about why. Monday arrived cold and sharp, the first real day of autumn making itself known through her window at 6:30 in the morning. She got up, she got dressed, she went to Vasilenko's. She ordered 2 coffees. Tatiana slid them across the counter. "You're becoming reliable," she said, which was the closest she'd come to a compliment in 2 weeks. "It's temporary," Lily said. "Most things," Tatiana said, "are." Lily took the coffees and walked to the building and rode the elevator to 14 and opened the door. Noah looked up. She put his coffee on the desk. He said, "Good morning." She said, "Good morning." They opened their notebooks and they got back to work. 10 days left, and the air between them had the particular quality of something that knows it has a clock on it. Not a countdown toward an ending, something closer to its opposite. The work was real. The clock was real. And underneath both of those things, steady and inconvenient and not going anywhere, so was everything else. 10 days sounds like enough time. It sounds like a reasonable container. 10 days to finish a project, close a chapter, return to the shape of your life before something came along and rearranged the furniture. Lily had managed entire brand identities in 10 days. She had moved apartments in 3. 10 days felt, in the abstract, like sufficient runway for 2 people to maintain professional distance and let a thing that hadn't fully started simply not start. What she had not accounted for was that 10 days is also long enough for everything to get harder. Monday's session ran long. They were deep in the final documentation of Meridian's creative approval chain, the part that exposed, with uncomfortable clarity, how many decisions got made by people several degrees removed from the actual work. Noah took careful notes on all of it. He didn't editorialize. He just recorded, which somehow made it worse. The way a doctor writing something down in a chart without changing expression makes you feel like whatever they found is significant. "What happens after the review?" Lily asked, around 11 o'clock. She meant professionally. She meant the report, the recommendations, what Meridian would look like on the other side of this. "Structural recommendations to the board," he said. "Some leadership changes, probably. Resource reallocation. The creative output here is stronger than the organizational structure supporting it." He looked at her over his laptop. "There are people who are underutilized and people who are overcredited." She didn't ask him to say it more plainly. She understood the translation. "Will Marcus know it came from the review?" she asked. "The review is a formal document. It goes to the board. Individual attributions within the recommendations are standard." He set his pen down. "You're asking if there's blowback for you." "I'm asking what I should be prepared for." He held her gaze. "Marcus Webb won't be your creative director by the end of the quarter," he said. "That's as much as I can tell you at this stage. The board makes the final call." Lily absorbed this. It should have felt like relief, and underneath it, it did. But the surface of it was something more complicated. The feeling you get when a problem you've been managing around is about to be solved without your participation, which is gratifying and disorienting in equal measure. "I didn't ask for that," she said. "No," he said. "You didn't ask for any of this." The sentence sat between them for a moment longer than it needed to. They kept working. Tuesday was the day Vanessa came back. Not to the office this time. Lily found out about it the way she found out about most things she wasn't supposed to know, which was through the specific texture of a silence that fell over the 14th floor when she arrived at 8:15 and found Noah already on a call that was, by the particular set of his shoulders, not a work call. She sat down. She unpacked her bag. She opened the Hartwell files, which were in their final week of preparation for client review, and she worked on those while he finished. He hung up and stood at the window for a long moment before he turned around. "Vanessa is leaving New York," he said. Lily looked up. "Okay. She's going back to Paris. She's been based there for the last year." He came back to the desk and sat down, but he didn't immediately pick up his notebook. "She called to say goodbye." He paused. "She also said—" He stopped, looking for the right word. "She said she thinks I'm different now than I was 3 years ago." He was looking at the desk. "I didn't know whether that was a compliment." "What do you think she meant?" He looked up. "I think she meant that the thing I was bad at, being present, I'm less bad at it." He said it plainly, without the performance of self-reflection, just the actual thing. She said she could see it, which means she could also see it then, when I wasn't. He was quiet for a moment. That's a strange thing to know. Lily looked at him. Do you still have feelings for her? He shook his head, immediately, not as a deflection, but as a genuine answer. No, I haven't for a long time. What I feel when I talk to Vanessa is, he thought about it. Responsibility, mostly, for what I was when we were together, and something like gratitude that she's honest enough to tell me what she sees. He paused. She's a good person. She is, Lily said, and meant it. He looked at her. Something in his expression shifted, that thing she'd learned to read, the place just before he said the real thing. Can I ask you something? You usually just ask. This one I'm asking permission for. He held her gaze. When you go back to 9, when the assignment's over, what happens? She had thought about this. She had thought about it on the subway and in the shower and in the 40 minutes before sleep that her brain had recently decided to use productively against her interests. I go back to my desk, she said. I finish Hartwell. I take on whatever comes next. That's not what I asked. She put her pen down. I know it's not. What happens with... He gestured, a small motion between them. This. The room was quiet. Maya was at her grandmother's in Boston until Thursday, and the absence of the small weight of her presence made the room feel larger and more exposed than usual. I told you to ask me when the assignment ended, Lily said. We have 7 days left, he said. I'm asking now. She looked at him. She thought about 18 reasons. She thought about Vanessa's voice. When he's all the way in, it's extraordinary. And she thought about 3 tries to get the right window seat cushion, and about a man standing on a sidewalk with his hands in his pockets until a car turned a corner. I don't know, she said. Honestly, I don't know what it looks like in practice. I know what I feel. I know it's real. I don't know how to make it work without one of us paying a cost I'm not sure either of us has fully calculated. He nodded slowly. He wasn't disappointed by the answer. She could tell. He was the kind of person who wanted the real thing over the comfortable thing, even when the real thing was unresolved. What would make it easier to calculate? If you weren't my employer's employer, she said. I know. If I had more leverage in my own professional situation. That's being addressed. I know it is, but it has to stand on its own. Whatever happens with you can't be what fixes my job situation. Those have to be separate. They are separate, he said. The review recommendations exist regardless of, he gestured again, regardless of anything else. I know that too, she said. I just need you to know that I know the difference. She picked up her pen. 7 days, she said. He picked up his notebook. 7 days, he agreed. They worked. But the quality of this working had changed, and they both knew it, and neither of them pretended otherwise. There was a heightened attention to ordinary things. The way she handed him a file, and their hands were briefly in the same proximity. The way he sometimes looked up from his work and caught her already looking. The particular texture of silences that were no longer just professional gaps between tasks, but something with more weight in them. It wasn't unbearable. It was the specific kind of difficult that comes from wanting something and waiting, which is its own distinct experience. Lily had done harder things. She reminded herself of this on Wednesday evening, riding the train home, standing again, holding the rail, the city sliding past the dark windows. She had moved to New York with $1,100. She had worked double shifts and built a portfolio from scratch, and sat across from Marcus Webb for 18 months, and held herself together through her mother's recovery and the rent increases and all the ordinary accumulated difficulty of being a person who was trying to build something from not quite enough. She could manage 7 days. What she could not manage, it turned out, was Wednesday evening in the 14th floor conference room. It was the end of the day. Noah had wanted to use the larger space to spread out the full documentation before he started drafting the report. Physical papers across a physical table, which was apparently how he worked when the thinking got complex. Lily was helping organize the sections, cross-referencing the notes from the last 2 weeks, when he stopped what he was doing and looked at her from across the table. I owe you something, he said. She looked up. What? For the elevator. The corner of his mouth moved. You said the apology barely counted. I agreed.
I've been thinking about what I owe you in return. She stared at him. You're not serious. I'm extremely serious. You don't owe me anything for the elevator. I was the one who... I've been thinking about this, he said over her, and I've landed on the position that I had an equal role in that moment, even if my role was purely circumstantial. Your role was standing in an elevator, in a way that was apparently open to interpretation. He set down the papers he was holding. I've decided the appropriate response is to tell you something true. She looked at him across the spread of documents. 2 weeks of work laid out between them, the whole architecture of what they'd built in this room. That's not revenge, she said. That's not even in the same category as revenge. I know. I'm terrible at revenge. He looked at her steadily. I've been thinking about you since the elevator. Not since the meeting, not since the assignment started. Since the elevator. He said it plainly, like a statement of fact rather than a declaration. I thought about it because I watched you walk out of that elevator, and I thought, there's someone who is not managing herself for anyone else's comfort, not even her own. A pause. I've spent a long time in rooms full of people who are very carefully managing themselves for my benefit. It was striking. You were striking. Lily held very still. That's the true thing, he said. That's what I owe you. The conference room was quiet. The city moved past the windows, indifferent, 23 floors down. I slapped you, she said. That's your romantic origin story? I'm not calling it romantic. What are you calling it? True, he said. Just true. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she went back to organizing the documentation, because they had work to finish and 7 days had become 6, and the papers on the table were real, and the report was real, and whatever was happening in the air between them would still be happening when the work was done. Help me sort the approval chain section, she said. He picked up the papers. They worked until 8:30. Thursday, Maya came back from Boston. She arrived on the 4 o'clock train, and Noah had collected her from Penn Station, and when they came into the 14th floor at 5, Lily was still there, finishing the cross-reference documentation. Maya dropped her backpack by the door and looked at Lily with the pleased expression of someone whose expectations have been confirmed. You're still here, she said. Still here, Lily agreed. Good. Maya went to her credenza, pulled out her sketchbook, and showed Lily what she'd drawn at her grandmother's house. 3 drawings, careful and developed, of a Japanese maple in the backyard. Different lights, different times of day. The morning one was done in very soft pencil work, the light in it barely there. The afternoon one had more contrast. The evening one was almost abstract, just the shapes of the branches against a graded sky. Lily looked at all 3 carefully. You're learning about value, she said, light and dark. You're starting to see in tones, not just lines. Maya took the sketchbook back and looked at the drawings herself, seeing them slightly differently now, Lily could tell. The morning one is my favorite, she said. Mine too, Lily said. The restraint in it. Maya looked at her. What's restraint? Knowing what not to draw, Lily said. Leaving space, it's one of the hardest things. Maya looked at the drawing for another moment. Then she wrote something small in the margin of it. Lily couldn't see what, and closed the sketchbook. Noah was at his desk, watching this exchange with the expression she'd seen at the museum, the one that was too full to be named cleanly. He looked away when she glanced at him. Friday brought the part Lily had been bracing for without fully admitting she'd been bracing for it. She arrived at 8:15 to find Noah already in a meeting. She could see him through the glass wall, on the phone, the body language of someone dealing with something large and fast-moving. She set down the coffees, opened her files, and was 40 minutes into the work when he came back to the desk looking like the call had been the kind that reorganizes your next several weeks. There's a situation in San Francisco, he said. One of our main infrastructure projects has a critical failure point. I need to be there by Sunday at the latest. She looked at him. This weekend. Saturday, ideally. He sat down, picked up his pen, set it back down. The review isn't finished. The report draft is maybe 60%. I can complete the documentation, Lily said. Everything we've built, I have all of it. I can put together the factual basis for the report, and you can write the analysis and recommendations from San Francisco. That's a significant amount of additional work for you,
It's what needs to happen. She said it straightforwardly because it was. The Hartwell client review is next Thursday. I can manage both. He looked at her. You don't have to absorb this. I know I don't. She picked up her pen. What do you need first? He was quiet for a moment, just looked at her, the way he sometimes did when she said the real thing rather than the negotiated thing. The approval chain analysis, he said. That's the foundation for most of the recommendations. I started it yesterday. I can have a draft to you by tomorrow afternoon. They worked through the morning with an urgency that hadn't been there before. Not panicked, but accelerated, the specific focus that comes when a deadline moves. They broke briefly for lunch, eating at the desk, something delivered, and somewhere around 2 o'clock they'd covered enough ground that Noah sat back and exhaled in the way people exhale when the acute crisis has become merely a significant problem. Thank you, he said. We're not done yet. I know, but thank you. She looked at him across the desk. Is Maya going with you? She has to. I can't. He stopped. My systems for when I travel don't work for an extended stay. I can't leave her here. Of course not, she paused. Does she know yet? I'm telling her tonight. Lily thought about the sketchbook, the Japanese maple drawings, the blue cloth cover held with both hands. She'll adapt, she said. She's good at adapting. I know. He said it the way he'd said it before, knowing it and wishing it weren't the thing he knew. The afternoon moved fast. By 4:30, they had the documentation framework substantially complete. By 5:30, Noah had a skeleton of the report that could be completed remotely. By 6, Lily was packing her bag and he was standing at the window. The same window where she'd first noticed the tire quality of his not looking, with his phone in his hand and his back to the room. I'll have the draft to you by tomorrow afternoon, she said. He turned. I fly out Saturday morning. I know. He looked at her. Lily. She stood with her bag over her shoulder. The day's light was almost gone, the room in the transitional dimness of evening in an office where no one had turned on the overhead lights yet. I'm aware, he said slowly, that I'm about to leave New York and the assignment is ending, and I told you I'd ask you something when it was over, and the timing is... He stopped. The timing is bad. The timing has always been bad, she said. That's not the same as it being too late. She looked at him. No, she said. It's not. He took 3 steps across the room. She registered this consciously, the deliberateness of it, the fact that he moved like someone who had decided something and was done with the deciding part. He was close enough now that she had to look up slightly. He raised his hand and she didn't move. Not because she was uncertain, but because she was the opposite of uncertain, because she was standing in the complete stillness of someone who knows exactly what they want and is letting it arrive. He touched her face, just his fingers along her jaw, where months ago her own hand had moved in anger and regret. He traced the angle of it, slow and deliberate, his thumb passing along her cheekbone, and his expression was the most unguarded she'd ever seen it. Not performed tenderness, not managed emotion, just the actual thing, present and undefended. This is the cheek, he said, very quietly. She felt the breath leave her slowly. What? The cheek you... He stopped. Something happened in his expression, something warm and a little helpless. I'm not going to say it was the best thing that ever happened to me. That would be a lot. It would be a lot, she agreed. Her voice was steady, which surprised her. But He looked at her. I'm glad you were in that elevator. I'm glad you had a bad day, and I'm glad you were standing behind me. And I'm even glad about the part that hurt, because it led here, and here is... He exhaled. Here is where I want to be. She looked up at him. The room was very quiet. Outside, the city did what it always did, going on without them, indifferent and perpetual. You're leaving Saturday, she said. Yes. And you don't know when you're back in New York. A month, maybe? The infrastructure situation could stretch. A month, she said. I know. She looked at him for a long moment. All the careful, reasonable, professionally boundaried parts of her were still present, still noting the complications, still running the arithmetic of what this cost. They were just not winning the argument anymore. Then you should probably not waste tonight, she said. He looked at her. Something broke open in his expression, not dramatically, not like a door being kicked down, but like a window being raised in a room that has been closed for too long. just light coming in. He leaned down and kissed her, not tentative, not the practiced ease of someone for whom this came effortlessly. She could feel that he was a little unsteady with it, which was somehow the most honest thing about him, that this man who was certain and deliberate in everything was slightly unsteady, kissing her in a half-dark office at the end of the day. His hand stayed along her jaw, the other at her shoulder, and she had one hand against his chest because she needed to feel that he was actually there, that this was actually happening, that it wasn't the particular cruelty of her own imagination. He was there. It was happening. When they separated, she kept her eyes closed for a moment, just another second of that. She opened them. He was watching her with an expression she didn't have a word for and didn't need one. "Okay," she said. "Okay," he said. She pulled back enough to be able to look at him properly. "You should go tell Maya about Saturday." He exhaled. "Right." He didn't move immediately. "Noah." She said his name the way he'd said hers that night on the street. Not formal, not professional, just the name, just him. "Yeah," he said. He stepped back. He picked up his jacket from the chair. "Saturday morning I fly out. Tomorrow? Would you come for dinner? With Maya. One more time before we go." "Yes," she said. He nodded. He looked at her for one more moment, then he went to get his daughter. Lily stood alone in the half-dark room. She pressed her hand flat against the desk where all their work was spread and felt her own heartbeat, fast and unsteady, doing the exact same thing it had done in the elevator. She hadn't been wrong about that moment. She'd been wrong about what it meant. She'd read it wrong and acted badly, and it had been a mess. But the instinct underneath, the sheer electrical awareness that something significant was in the room with her, that had not been wrong. She gathered the last of her files. She turned off the desk lamp. She took the elevator down. On the 9th floor, she stopped and stood at her own desk for a moment. Her north-facing desk, in the gray light, which was dark now, fully night. She looked at her monitor, the Hartwell files. The ongoing work of being someone who worked here and needed this job and paid rent and called her mother and had a life that was built from careful, real things. She was still that person. That hadn't changed. It had just gotten more complicated in a way that felt, for the first time in a very long time, worth the complication. She took the train home. She ate dinner. She called her mother. "You sound different," Ruth Carter said. Lily was quiet for a moment. "Different how?" "Like something happened." "Something happened," Lily said. Her mother waited. She was good at that. Ruth Carter had always had the patience to wait for things to arrive rather than reaching for them. "It's complicated," Lily said. "Is it good?" Lily leaned against her kitchen counter and looked at the west-facing window, fully dark now, just the ambient glow of the neighborhood beyond the glass. She thought about a half-dark room and a hand along her jaw and the particular quality of being unsteady with someone. "Yeah," she said. "I think it's good." "Then don't ruin it by thinking too hard," her mother said. "You get in your own way." "I know. You always have." A pause. "Tell me about him." Lily almost said I didn't say it was a him, but it was late and she was tired and her mother had known her for 30 years. "He's going to San Francisco on Saturday," she said. "And? And I don't know what happens after that." "Lily." "Mom." "You just said it's good. Good things don't need a full plan." Lily was quiet for a moment. "When did you get wise?" "I've always been wise. You just started listening." She could hear the smile in her mother's voice. "You should sleep. You sound tired." "I am tired." "Get some sleep." "I will." "And Lily?" "Yeah. The complicated things are usually the ones worth it, in my experience." A pause. "Good night." "Good night, Mom." She hung up. She stood in the quiet kitchen for another minute. Then she got ready for bed and lay down and looked at the ceiling in the dark. Tomorrow, dinner. Saturday, he was gone. And then something. Something neither of them had fully mapped. Something with variables she couldn't all see yet. Something that would require her to extend a specific kind of trust in a specific kind of direction and probably get it wrong a few times before she got it right. Because that was how things worked, how real things worked. Not smoothly, not without damage, but forward. She closed her eyes. Outside, the city went on. Inside, very quietly, something that had been careful for a long time started to unknot. She slept. The dinner on Friday was at Noah's rented apartment, which Lily had not been to before. It was on the 31st floor of a building in Midtown that was exactly what you'd expect from a furnished corporate rental. Good bones, no personality, the specific blankness of a space that hosts people without belonging to anyone. Nice enough that it didn't feel depressing, characterless enough that you could tell nobody had chosen any of it. The couch was a shade of gray that no one would pick deliberately. The art on the walls was the kind of art that exists specifically to not offend anyone, which meant it didn't do anything at all. Maya had done what she could with it. Her drawings were taped to the wall beside the window. The Japanese maple series from Boston, 2 of the museum animals, a new one Lily hadn't seen that appeared to be a whale with moth wings, rendered in deep blues and soft grays. Her blue cloth sketchbook was on the kitchen table next to a box of colored pencils. The red throw pillow from the credenza was on the couch. A pair of small rain boots by the door, one tipped over. It looked, in spite of everything, like somewhere someone lived. She brought most of this in a backpack, Noah said, coming out of the kitchen when Lily came in. He was in a t-shirt and jeans, which was different, and Lily registered the difference the way you register anything that shows you a new angle of someone you've been looking at closely. He handed her a glass of wine. I don't know how she fit all of it. She's resourceful, Lily said. She really is. He looked at the drawings on the wall. She put those up the first night. She said the walls were sad. They were sad. They're better now. He said it simply, about the drawings, about the apartment. But Lily heard it as more than that, and she thought he knew she heard it that way, and neither of them made a thing of it. Maya appeared from what was apparently the bedroom, already in pajamas, which she had put on voluntarily because she had decided pajamas were the correct clothing for a Friday dinner at home. She was carrying the whale moth drawing, which she presented to Lily immediately. I finished it, she said. Lily held it, looked at it properly. The creature had an impossible anatomy that somehow worked. The whale body was solid and weighted. The moth wings were fragile, dusted with the pattern detail Maya had been developing. They should have canceled each other out, and instead they made something that felt, improbably, like it could exist, like it had found its own logic. Maya, Lily said, this is genuinely beautiful. Maya looked at the drawing with her. The wings were hard. I can see where you worked them out. You changed the attachment point. 3 times, Maya said. The first 2 didn't make sense with how whales actually move. She said how whales actually move with the authority of someone who had spent real time on this, which she had. Lily handed the drawing back, and Maya set it carefully on the kitchen table, next to the sketchbook, in the particular way she handled things she cared about. They ate dinner. Noah had made pasta, actual pasta, not ordered it, which surprised Lily more than she wanted to show. It was not a perfect dinner. The sauce was slightly over-salted, which he acknowledged without much ceremony, and Maya decided she didn't want the particular shape of pasta he'd cooked and ate around the pieces in a strategy that she seemed to believe was invisible. They sat at the kitchen table with the drawings and the sketchbook and talked about the museum and about Maya's school in San Francisco and about a book Maya was reading that involved a girl who could speak to rivers, which she described with enough detail that Lily wondered whether Noah had read it too, and he confirmed quietly that he had. 3 times. On request. I make him do the voices, Maya said. I'm not good at the voices, Noah said. He makes the river sound like a very old man, Maya told Lily. Rivers don't sound like very old men. What do they sound like? Lily asked. Maya thought about this seriously. Like something that's always moving but never in a hurry, she said. Then she ate a piece of pasta she'd been avoiding and went back to her food as though she hadn't just said something that should be written down somewhere. Lily looked at her plate. She felt Noah looking at her and didn't return it immediately, just held the moment in her chest where it could stay intact for a little longer. After dinner, Maya showed Lily the whale moth drawing one more time, this time explaining the research she'd done on moth wing patterns, which she had saved in a folder on Noah's iPad. Actual photographs, organized by species. She had notes. 6 years old, and she had annotated reference notes on moth wing patterns because she needed to understand the thing before she could draw it. Lily thought about her own sketchbooks at that age, the compulsive filling of every page, the hunger to look and record. The absolute seriousness with which she had treated a drawing of a horse when she was 7 that she'd worked on for 4 days because the legs weren't right. She had not thought about that drawing in years. "When you go back to San Francisco," Lily said, "will you keep drawing?" "Every day," Maya said, as though this was not a question. "Will you show me when you're done with things?" Maya looked at her with the assessing expression. "How?" "Your dad has my number," Lily said. "He could take a picture and send it." Maya looked at Noah. "Can you do that?" "Yes," he said. "Okay." Maya looked at Lily. "I'm working on something else, an Arctic fox, but I need to understand the fur better. It's different from regular fur." "It is," Lily agreed. "It's layered. 2 coats, actually. The undercoat is very dense. If you look at references, you'll see the outer fur moves differently from the way cat fur does." Maya grabbed the iPad. Noah met Lily's eyes across the table, and she saw in his face the particular expression she'd been cataloging for weeks, the one that happened when something exceeded what he'd been prepared for, and he was still catching up. They did the dishes together while Maya retreated to the couch with the iPad and began what was apparently a thorough photographic investigation of Arctic fox fur. Noah washed, Lily dried, because the kitchen was not large enough for both of them to do the same task, and the arrangement settled naturally without discussion, which felt like its own small information. "She's going to miss you," he said, not looking up from the sink. "I'm going to miss her," Lily said. And then, because it was true and she was tired of managing what was true, "Both of you." He passed her a pan. Their hands were in the same space for a moment. He didn't rush through it. "A month," he said. "Maybe less if the infrastructure situation resolves cleanly. And I'll be back in New York in any case. The board wants a follow-up meeting on the review." "I know," she said. "I'll still be here." "I know you will." He looked at her. "I want to call you while I'm there, not just about work." "Then call me," she said. He nodded. He handed her the last dish. She dried it and set it on the counter, and they stood in the small kitchen with the sounds of Maya's research happening from the couch and the city doing its perpetual thing 40 floors below. "I keep thinking about the elevator," he said. "You need to let that go," she said. "No, I mean—" He turned to lean against the counter facing her. "I think about what would have happened if I'd been in a different part of that elevator, if you hadn't heard me. If the doors had opened on 15 instead of 23 and you'd gotten off without ever turning around." He looked at her steadily. "I know that's how chance works. I know it doesn't mean anything, but I think about it." "It means we're both bad at hypotheticals," she said. "Maybe." He didn't look away. "Or it means that the version of this where we never met is worse, and that's worth knowing." She held his gaze. "Yeah," she said, "that's worth knowing." From the couch, Maya said without looking up from the iPad, "Arctic foxes have 150 times the insulating capacity of regular fur." "That's a lot," Noah said. "It's so they can survive at -50 degrees, Maya said. "I'm going to draw the layers separately and then show how they work together." "Good idea," Lily said. "I know," said Maya. Lily laughed, a real one, the kind that comes out before you authorize it. Noah watched her laugh and didn't say anything, just watched, and she didn't mind being watched for once in her life. She left at 9:30. Maya gave her a hug at the door, the same quick total hug as before, the one that didn't perform itself, and then went back to the couch without ceremony, already returned to the Arctic fox research. Noah walked Lily to the elevator. "I'll have the documentation complete by tomorrow noon," she said. "I'll send it before you leave." "You don't have to do that tomorrow morning." "I know I don't." She pressed the elevator button. "It needs to be done." He stood with his hands in his jacket pockets, looking at her the way he'd looked at her on the street 2 weeks ago. The same attention, but more settled now, less like something being decided and more like something that had been. The elevator opened. "Noah," she said. "Yeah." "Don't disappear," she said. "When you get back there and it's work and it's Maya and it's the 1,000 other things, don't go somewhere I can't follow." He looked at her for a moment. She'd used the word Vanessa had used without meaning to. She saw him recognize it. "I won't," he said. Not quickly, not as a deflection. He said it like someone who understood what was being asked and had made the calculation before answering. She got in the elevator. He stood in the hall until the doors closed. She looked at the floor numbers counting down and pressed her hand flat against the cool elevator wall and thought, this is the part where you find out what someone is. Not the dinners and the museums and the good conversations. The distance. The ordinary days when nothing romantic is happening and it's just two people deciding to keep showing up for each other across 800 miles. That's the part that reveals the actual thing. She was scared of that part. She was also not going to let the fear make the decision for her. She had decided this somewhere around the 31st floor, and she was keeping it. She finished the documentation Saturday morning in her apartment. On the floor, the nonprofit drawings moved aside to make space. She sent it at 11:42. At 11:49, her phone buzzed. This is complete. Thank you. I mean it. She typed back, safe flight. Then after a moment, tell Maya the Arctic fox is a good choice. A pause. Then a photo came through. Maya at the airport gate, sketchbook open in her lap, already drawing, the blue cloth cover just visible. Noah had taken it from slightly behind her so she hadn't noticed. Underneath the photo, he'd written, she started on the plane research the moment we got here. Send help. Lily saved the photo. She didn't examine why. She just saved it and went back to the nonprofit work and spent the rest of Saturday doing something that was entirely hers, in the quiet of her own apartment, in the particular satisfaction of work that didn't need to be explained to anyone. The Hartwell client review was Thursday, and it went the way Lily had known it would go, because she had built it to go that way. The client loved the packaging concepts. They approved the primary direction without revision requests, which almost never happen, and which Marcus attempted to receive as a collaborative triumph, and which the client, having read the CC'd emails for 3 weeks, understood to be Lily's work in a way that was now documented. Marcus said nothing to her directly. He hadn't, since Noah's conversation with him. He moved around her in the office with the careful neutrality of someone who has recalibrated their threat assessment and is waiting for the next clear signal. The next clear signal came on the following Tuesday in an email from the board's operational committee, a restructuring announcement, effective the 1st of the month, in which Marcus Webb was moved to a client relations advisory role with no direct reports, and the creative department would be overseen on an interim basis by a director being brought in from outside while a permanent search was conducted. The email noted that internal candidates were encouraged to apply for the permanent director position. Priya read the email from 3 desks over and looked at Lily with an expression that traveled through several stages before landing on something that was mostly joy with a complication in it. Are you going to apply? She said. I don't know yet, Lily said. Lily, I genuinely don't know. She looked at the email. It's a significant change. It would mean... She thought about the nonprofit work, the floor of her apartment, the quality of work she did when it was only hers. It would mean doing less of the thing I'm actually best at. It would also mean never having a Marcus Webb again, Priya said. You'd be your own Marcus Webb, but better, obviously. That's a terrifying sentence. Think about it, Priya said. She thought about it. She thought about it on the train and during lunch and while she was working on the next project that had landed on her desk, a rebranding for a healthcare company that was genuinely interesting, complex enough to require real thinking. She thought about what she wanted her work life to look like in 5 years, which was a question she'd been avoiding because the answer kept changing and she didn't trust a moving target. The thing she came back to each time was this. She was good at making things. She was also, and this was newer, she was still figuring out its edges, good at seeing how other people could make things better. Those were different skills. She'd been treating them as separate, but they weren't. The best creative directors she'd admired had both. They made and they enabled. They had a point of view and they used it to expand other people's points of view. She could do that. She pulled up the application. She worked on it over 3 evenings, the same way she worked on design, iteratively, with revision, starting from what she actually believed rather than what she thought they wanted to hear. She wrote about attribution and creative infrastructure and what it meant to build a culture where the work was the thing that mattered rather than who owned it. She wrote about the Hartwell project, factually, with complete information about origination and development. She wrote about what she thought a creative department should actually do and how it should work. She sent it on a Thursday night at 10:15 and then made tea and sat at her window in the dark. Noah called at 10:30, which was 7:30 in San Francisco, which she'd started tracking without deciding to. The infrastructure situation is worse than we thought, he said. He sounded tired, not the kind of tired that was performance, but the actual kind, the kind that lives in the voice. We're probably looking at 6 weeks, not 4. She absorbed this. Okay. I know that's... It's okay, she said. It's what it is. Lily. Noah. It's okay. She meant it. How's Maya? He exhaled. She finished the Arctic Fox. She wants to show you. Can you send it? A pause, and then the photo came through while they were still talking. The finished drawing, photographed on a white background. The Arctic fox was extraordinary. The fur layers were rendered with a specificity and patience that shouldn't have been possible for someone who had never been formally taught, and the animal had a quality of weight and life that made it feel present on the page. The white of the fur was done in negative space, the paper itself, with the lightest possible pencil work suggesting the outer coat's movement. Lily looked at it for a long time. Noah, she said. I know, he said. He sounded like someone who had looked at the drawing many times and was still not quite over it. She needs real instruction, not formal school necessarily, but she should be working with someone who can show her things, in person, someone with actual technique. I've been thinking about that, he said. Do you have a recommendation? I have a few names, she said. I can send them. That would... He stopped. Thank you. Stop thanking me for things. I'll stop when there are fewer things to thank you for. She looked at the Arctic fox drawing on her phone screen. I applied for the director position, she said. A pause. Tell me. She told him, not the strategic version, not the managed version. She told him what she'd actually written, what she'd said she believed, what she'd said she thought the job should be. He listened the way he always listened, without interrupting, and when she finished there was a brief silence that she'd learned to read as actual thinking rather than absence. They'd be fortunate to have you, he said. You have a conflict of interest in that assessment. My conflict of interest doesn't make the assessment wrong. He paused. When do they decide? 3 weeks. I'll be back in New York before then. She held her phone. Outside, the west-facing window showed her the usual ambient glow of the neighborhood, the same view she'd stood at on so many late evenings trying to figure out what she thought and felt and wanted. You should know, she said, that my decision on this has nothing to do with whether you're in New York when they decide. I made it for my own reasons. I know that, he said. I wouldn't want it any other way. She believed him. That was the thing. She actually believed him. It had taken her time to get there. The specific earned trust of someone who has watched another person's actions long enough to be reasonably sure they match the stated positions. He had said he wouldn't disappear, and he had not disappeared. He called, not just about the report, not just about logistics. He called to tell her Maya had drawn a complete series of cavefish because she'd gone down a Wikipedia rabbit hole at 9:30 on a school night. He called because he'd seen something on the street in San Francisco that had made him think of something she'd said, and he wanted to tell her about it. He sent photographs of Maya's drawings with a steadiness she hadn't expected and had begun tentatively to rely on. She was not good at relying on people. She was aware of this. She had built a life on her own competence and her own resources because she had understood early that depending on others was a variable she couldn't always control, and she preferred controllable variables. It had made her capable in private and in the specific ways she was now acknowledging to herself, lonely in the quiet spaces. She was working on it. It was effortful and ongoing, and she was not doing it perfectly. She thought sometimes about what her mother had said. The complicated things are usually the ones worth it. Ruth Carter had been married to Lily's father for 31 years, through the leaking roof and the broken car and the medical bills and everything that came after. She had loved him through the versions of him that were difficult as well as the ones that were easy, and he had done the same for her. And it had not been a smooth or perfect thing, and it had been worth every year. That was the model Lily had grown up inside of. Not a fairy tale. Something sturdier and less flattering and more real. She could work with real. 6 weeks passed the way 6 weeks pass when you're busy enough to not watch them go. The Hartwell campaign launched on schedule and landed better than the client had projected, which resulted in an email from the client that Lily received directly because her name was finally on the right things. She started the healthcare rebranding. She had 2 conversations with the board's search committee about the director position. both of which went well in the way that conversations go well when you've stopped trying to say the right thing and started just saying the true thing. The nonprofit literacy program launched their new visual identity in October. Lily's friend who ran the program sent her a photograph of the new materials, the printed brochures, the signage in the community center, the whole system installed in the actual world, and Lily looked at that photograph for a long time. She had made a thing that was now living somewhere beyond her, doing its work without her, which was the point of all of it, always. She printed the photograph and put it on her desk. On a Tuesday in late October, she was at that desk when her phone buzzed with a message she'd been expecting and not letting herself fully expect. Landing at JFK at 4. "Are you free tonight?" She typed back, "Yes." She finished what she was working on. She went home and changed, not dramatically, just into her own things, the clothes that were actually hers and not her professional presentation. She made tea and stood at the window, the late October light thin and clean, the neighborhood going about its business below. The buzzer sounded at 7. She pressed the intercom. "Yeah, it's cold out here," Noah's voice said, with the particular dry quality she had missed more than she'd been fully admitting. She buzzed him in. She heard him on the stairs, the 5 flights, which she'd warned him about in a text that he'd responded to with a voice memo of himself breathing heavily, which had made her laugh alone in her apartment at 11 at night. Now she heard his actual footsteps and then a knock, and she opened the door. He looked like someone who had been traveling for 8 hours and had not slept enough and needed a haircut. He was carrying a paper bag that smelled like the Ukrainian place, which meant he had gone to Vasilenko's before coming here, which meant Tatiana had confirmed he was a regular, which she had apparently done without him having to explain anything. "Hi," he said. "Hi," she said. She stepped back and he came in. He took in the apartment, the west-facing windows, the nonprofit photograph on the corner of her desk, the design work spread on the floor from the morning, the sketchbooks she'd started keeping again, the accumulated evidence of how she actually lived. "It looks like you," he said. "Is that good or bad?" "It's exactly what I thought it would look like," he said. "That's good." He set the bag down on her kitchen counter. She opened it. 2 coffees, the right kinds, which meant he'd remembered without asking, and a paper bag of something that turned out to be the honey walnut pastry Tatiana made on Tuesdays that Lily had mentioned in passing in a phone call 3 weeks ago. She looked at the pastry. She looked at him. "You remembered that," she said. "I write things down," he said. She laughed. He smiled at her. The full one. The one he didn't manage. The one that was just his face doing what it did when something was actually good. They sat at her kitchen table with the coffees and the pastry and talked for 2 hours. Not about work. There was work to talk about. The review follow-up, the board meeting scheduled for next week, the director decision that she still hadn't heard on, but they talked around the edges of it and mostly talked about other things. Maya's new school in San Francisco, where she had already found one friend who she deemed acceptable, a book Lily had read, a documentary Noah had watched on the plane about deep-sea ecosystems that had made him think of Maya's early work, the sea creatures, the way San Francisco felt different from New York, not better or worse, just a different quality of air and light. At some point, the kitchen got dark around them, and neither of them got up to turn on the light, just let the apartment dim to the warm, ambient glow of the window, and kept talking. "The director position," he said eventually. "They called this morning," she said. He waited. "They offered it," she said. He looked at her. "And?" "I took it." She held his gaze. "I took it because I want it and I'm ready for it, and because I wrote the application about things I actually believe, and it turns out people respond to that." She paused. "I need you to know it had nothing to do with—" "I know," he said. "I know it didn't." He was quiet for a moment. "Are you happy about it?" She thought about the question with the honesty it deserved. "I'm scared," she said. "And yes." He nodded. "Those usually come together," he said. "Yeah," she said. "I've noticed." She looked at him across the table. The man from the elevator, which was still somehow the way she oriented the story in her own head. Not as a romantic beginning, but as the literal starting point. The moment when a bad day in a crowded elevator and a single misread sentence had cracked open into something she would not have predicted and could not imagine undoing. She had been wrong about him in that elevator. She had been wrong about what was happening, and she had acted on the wrongness, and it had been genuinely embarrassing, and she had not let it diminish her, which was the part she thought about sometimes. The part that said something about her she needed to know. And he had not let it define her either. He had taken the slap and the apology and the whole awkward mess of it and decided to be curious rather than aggrieved, which said something about him she needed to know. They were both imperfect people who had done imperfect things and were, with effort and genuine attention, building something careful and real. "I have something for you," he said. He reached into his jacket pocket and put something on the table between them. A small, flat envelope. From Maya. Lily opened it. Inside was a drawing, folded carefully in thirds. The whale moth, but developed, fuller than the version she'd seen in the apartment. Maya had worked on it over the last 6 weeks, clearly adding depth and detail. The wings had the kind of specific pattern work that came from the moth research. The whale body had an underwater weight to it. And in the bottom right corner, in the careful handwriting of someone who took handwriting seriously, Maya had written, "For Lily," who helped with the shoulder angles. Lily held it. She pressed her lips together and looked at the drawing and did not cry, which took some work. "She's been working on it since San Francisco," Noah said. "She wanted it to be done before I came back." "Tell her—" Lily stopped, looked at the drawing. "Tell her the wings are exactly right." "You can tell her," Noah said. "She's going to call tomorrow. She wants to know how the Arctic fox research is going to work, whether you've looked at the names you sent." "I looked at all of them," Lily said. "I have thoughts." "She'll want to hear them." Lily set the drawing down on the table with the care it deserved. She looked at Noah. He looked back, unhurried, the way he'd looked at her from the beginning, like he had decided something and wasn't going back on it. "This is real," she said. Not a question. A checkpoint. An honest asking. "Yes," he said. The same way he'd said no about Vanessa on the phone weeks ago. Immediate and complete and not performing certainty but simply having it. "It's going to be difficult sometimes," she said. "The distance, the way our lives work. Your life is large and complicated." "So is yours," he said. "Mine is about to get more complicated," she said. "New job, bigger responsibilities, less time." "I know. I need you to know it in advance, not theoretically, actually." He held her gaze across the small kitchen table, the drawing between them, the coffee going cool. "I know it," he said, "and I'm staying." She held that word, staying. Not a grand promise, not a contractual declaration. Just a man telling her the simple, accurate thing about what he intended. She nodded. "Okay," she said. "Okay," he said. She got up to make more tea. He got up to help because the kitchen was small and the kettle was on the far side of the counter and he was already standing. They worked around each other in the small space without choreography, just the natural negotiation of two people who have learned each other's rhythms without planning to. She thought about her parents in the kitchen of the house with the leaking roof, the strategic buckets, the rain on aluminum, the 31 years of working around each other in small spaces and large silences, and all the ordinary days that made up a life. It had not been a smooth or perfect thing, and it had been the most real thing she'd ever watched. She was not her parents. Noah was not her father. This was not that story. It would be its own story, with its own shape, its own difficulties, its own version of the leaking roof. But the essential thing, the willingness to stay in the room, to tell the truth even when it was inconvenient, to extend trust and mean it, that part she recognized. She could work with that. They drank the tea at the window, standing side by side, looking out at the west-facing view. The light was fully gone now, the neighborhood in its nighttime state, the amber glow of streetlights and lit windows, and all the accumulated quiet lives going on behind glass. "I love this window," he said. "I know," she said. "It's the best thing about this apartment. It turns gold for a while, in the evenings." She looked at him. "How do you know that?" "You mentioned it," he said. "A while ago. One of the early phone calls." He looked out at the dark. "I've been thinking about it." She turned back to the window. The city was doing what it always did, going on, indifferent and perpetual, holding several million lives at once without knowing the name of a single one of them. Out there were people having first conversations and last ones, people arriving and leaving, people in elevators making small sounds that were open to interpretation. Here, in a fifth-floor walk-up in Astoria,
with west-facing windows and a non-profit photograph on the desk and a drawing of a whale moth on the kitchen table. Two people were standing close enough that the warmth of one reached the other, looking at nothing in particular and saying nothing in particular and being exactly where they were. Lily thought about the elevator. She thought about the slap in the silence and his voice, steady and unhurried. That was an interesting interpretation. She thought about how a moment of anger and exhaustion and misread information had been the door, the accidental door, the one she'd have never looked for on purpose. Not every door you find by accident is the wrong door. Some of them are the ones you needed to walk through and just didn't know yet where to find. She knew something else now, too. Something she'd been learning slowly over these weeks, in the space between her own careful life and the person standing next to her at this window. That being known, actually known, the difficult parts and the dark parts and the parts you keep quiet because they're too important to risk, is not the same as being seen. Being seen is easy. People see you all the time without understanding a single thing. Being known takes longer.
It requires someone who asks the real questions and waits for the real answers and doesn't flinch when the real answers are complicated. She had spent a long time being good at being seen and afraid of being known. She was less afraid now. Noah reached over without looking away from the window and took her hand. Not dramatically, just took it, the same way Maya had taken it on the sidewalk outside the museum. Easy, unhurried, like this was simply the correct thing to do and always had been. She let her hand be held. Outside the city. Inside something that had taken its time arriving and intended to stay. She held on,